Hey guys, tonight we are sneaking past the bonnets and the ballrooms and the very strict rules about who may glance at whom across a quadrille into one of the best kept open secrets of the Regency era. How two women could fall completely in love, share a bed for 50 years, and have all of polite society call it a lovely friendship. Not with codes, not with bribes, not with daring midnight escapes, although there was at least one of those. No, they got away with it because an entire civilization had decided, very firmly, that women could not possibly want anything at all. It means a lot that you are here, and that you fall asleep to me on a regular basis, which I have decided to take as a compliment. If I have become part of your bedtime routine, go ahead and hit the like, give the channel a subscribe, and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and which historical figure you would most want reading you poetry until midnight. Now get comfortable, dim the lamp, settle into the pillows, and draw the blanket up to roughly the height a Regency chaperone would consider scandalous. Ever lain awake wondering how two women could share one bed in front of an entire household and have everyone assume they were simply saving on firewood? How a love letter could read like a marriage proposal and still get filed under fond regards? What the polite word for it was? What the rude word for it was? Why the church handled the whole subject by flatly refusing to admit it existed? How you would test whether a promising new acquaintance was, shall we say, also a reader of certain books? And what exactly the Regency equivalent of eloping with a pistol and a small dog looked like at an extremely ungodly hour? Congratulations. You just woke up in England, 1810. Your bonnet is itchy. Your mother has lined up 3 eligible men and a backup clergyman, and the only person you actually want to write to is sitting 4 chairs away, pretending to admire the wallpaper. Good luck. You wake before the maid comes up, which means you have a few minutes to lie still and feel the weight of the arrangement nobody questions. Beside you, under the same blankets, is the woman you love, and the entire household considers this completely ordinary. 2 women sharing a bed is not evidence of anything. It is thrift, it is friendship, it is what spinsters do. You have learned to live inside that assumption like a warm room, and the first task of every morning is simply deciding when to get up. The bed itself is a co-conspirator. It is wide, it is cold at the edges, and it has held the 2 of you through every winter you can remember, sagging gently toward the middle in a way that rolls you together whether you planned it or not. The mattress keeps your secret beautifully, mostly because the mattress has no idea it is keeping one. To the rest of the house, you are 2 sensible women economizing on coal, since a shared bed is warmer than 2 cold ones, and warmth in an English January is not a luxury but a survival strategy. This is the quiet genius of the situation, and you cannot take credit for it. The age simply cannot picture what it has refused to name. A man and a woman discovered in one bed would trigger a chain of events ending in either a wedding or a ruin. 2 women discovered in one bed trigger absolutely nothing. The housemaid who carries up the morning chocolate has seen this 1,000 times and reached the only conclusion her vocabulary allows, that you are the very best of friends, devoted, inseparable, and a little old-fashioned about it. There is a cat at the foot of the bed who considers himself the senior partner in the household. He arrives at first light, walks the full length of both your legs with the unhurried authority of a landlord inspecting a property he intends to raise the rent on, and settles directly upon whichever of you was planning to rise first. He has firm opinions about the arrangement. His opinion is that the arrangement should involve far more lying still and considerably more attention paid to the cat. Then there is Hannah, the maid, who knocks twice, waits a beat, and comes in with the tray and the news. Hannah pulls the curtains with the brisk, weary, and unbothered competence of a woman who decided years ago that whatever happens in this room is none of her business and most of her livelihood. She sets down the chocolate. She reports that the grocer called and the curate is poorly. She does not, ever, remark on the 2 heads denting 2 pillows on the same side of one bed. Hannah's silence is not ignorance. Hannah's silence is loyalty, and it is worth a good deal more than the chocolate. Under the loose board on her side of the bed lives a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon, and every sheet in it would, read aloud in a courtroom, sound like the most fevered romance in the language. Not one word of it is in code. Not one word of it had to be. You wrote my own beloved across the top because the etiquette of female friendship permitted exactly that, and a whole postal system carried your longing across 3 counties on the gentle assumption that ladies are simply like this with one another. The day will want things from you soon. There will be calls to return, a suitor to discourage, a mother somewhere drafting a guest list with your name underlined twice. But for these few grey minutes, before anyone needs you to be friends instead of what you actually are, the bed holds the whole truth and tells nobody. You reach across the cold sheet. She is warm. The cat, displaced, registers a formal complaint. It is, in its small way, the safest square yard in England. You are 17, and you have been dressed, curled, and positioned near the good candles, because tonight you are inventory. The assembly room is full of mothers performing arithmetic, matching daughters to incomes, and you are expected to smile, dance, and be selected. Nobody has asked what you want, because what you want is not a recognised category. You want to go home, take off the stays, and write to the one person whose letters you reread until the paper softens. Instead, you curtsy, and you wait to be appraised. The assembly room is doing what it always does, which is conducting an auction while pretending to host a dance. The candles are good because good light sells, and you have been placed near them the way a grocer sets the best apples at the front of the barrow. Your dance card is filling with names you did not choose, each one a man your mother has already costed out to the shilling. You will dance with all of them. You will be, for 3 hours, an extremely well-behaved commodity. Across the room, Mrs. Pelham runs the whole operation like a general who has never lost a battle and does not intend to start tonight. She catches your eye, taps her closed fan twice against her wrist, and tilts her head a precise 1/4 inch toward a tall man by the window. The signal means smile at him, so you smile at him, because the alternative is a conversation in the carriage home that you would rather chew glass than have. The fan is mightier than your entire will to live. Let's talk about the arithmetic, because the arithmetic is the romance here, and everyone in the room knows it. A daughter is an asset with a carrying cost, and that cost rises every year she remains unsold. Marry her at 18, and she is a triumph. Fail to marry her at all, and she becomes a permanent line in the household accounts, a soft expense filed somewhere between the candles and the coal. You are, at this precise moment, a depreciating asset in good silk. The man by the window turns out to be perfectly pleasant, which is its own small tragedy. He talks about his horses with real warmth and asks you 2 entire questions about yourself, which by the standards of the evening makes him a romantic poet. You answer well. You laugh in the correct places, and the whole time, some cool clerk at the back of your mind is taking notes you can never read aloud, because the only person in this glittering room you actually want to stand beside is a woman trapped in an identical conversation on the far side of the floor. You can see her over his shoulder. She is doing exactly what you are doing, nodding at a man who is explaining something, holding her glass like a small shield. For half a second your eyes meet across the entire crowded performance, and a complete sentence passes between you that nobody else in the building could decode. Then a matron steps into the sightline, the spell breaks, and you both go back to being merchandise on display. The heat is relentless, and so is the noise. The room smells of beeswax, hair powder, and the particular sour panic of mothers watching a season tick away. Somewhere a fiddle saws through its 40th reel of the night, your feet ache inside their thin slippers, and a dowager by the punch has been describing her nephew's income for so long that the income now feels like a member of the family who has joined the party. By midnight the candles gutter, and so do you. Names have been collected, impressions have been formed. Mrs. Pelham looks satisfied, which is the most ominous expression she owns. You will be discussed in 3 separate carriages on the way home, weighed and ranked and gently haggled over, an evening's honest work concluded. And not one of those carriages will carry the only conversation that actually mattered, the silent one, sent across a ballroom in half a second and received perfectly. You have a suitor, and he is not a bad man, which somehow makes it worse. He calls on Tuesdays, brings small thoughtful gifts, and talks about his acreage with the steady confidence of someone who has never been refused. Your job, conducted entirely in hints and polite delays, is to discourage him without ever saying the true reason, because the true reason has no words you are allowed to use in a drawing room. So you become vague. You develop sudden headaches. You praise other, distant women as far better matches than yourself. His name is Mr. Albury, and he has decided, on what evidence you cannot imagine, that the two of you share an understanding. You share no understanding. You share a standing appointment with Dread every Tuesday at 3, when his curricle rounds the corner and your stomach performs a small doomed somersault. He brings hothouse grapes. He brings a volume of sermons he is certain you will adore. He brings, above all, an unshakable confidence that the matter is essentially settled and only the date remains. Your campaign against him is a quiet masterpiece of saying nothing while doing everything. You cannot tell him the truth, because the truth has no polite form. No etiquette manual prints the sentence that begins, "I am afraid I cannot marry you because, so you have become a fog." You agree with him about the weather and instantly forget his opinions on all other subjects. You are warm enough to avoid cruelty and cool enough to avoid hope, threading a needle so fine that some evenings you go to bed worn out purely from the labour of being gently disappointing. The headaches are your most loyal troops. A headache cannot be argued with, requires no explanation, and permits no follow-up question. When Mr. Ulbury arrives with that particular shine in his eye, the shine of a man working himself up to a speech, you press 2 fingers delicately to your temple and the speech retreats like a tide going out. You have developed, across one long spring, the most convenient migraines in the county, and your mother has begun to fret about your constitution, which is its own useful screen of smoke. Your Aunt Sophronia is no help whatsoever and considerable danger. She adores Mr. Ulbury, calls him Dear Edward already, and has a fatal habit of leaving the 2 of you alone together with a coy little pat to your shoulder, as though privacy were a present rather than an ambush. Aunt Sophronia pats your shoulder the way a chess player nudges a pawn forward, all apparent kindness and total strategic intent. You have learned to keep a third person in the room at any cost, even if that third person is the footman, even if that third person is the cat. Let's be honest about the cruelty of it, because there is cruelty here, and none of it is his. Mr. Albury has done nothing wrong. He is kind, he is solvent, he is precisely what you are meant to want, and wanting him would untangle every practical problem in your life at a single stroke. The tragedy is structural. He is a perfectly good answer to a question you were never actually asking, and no quantity of grapes can transform him into the woman whose handwriting makes your entire chest go quiet. So you praise other women to him constantly and strategically. Have you met Miss Carteret, such an elegant girl and so very fond of horses? You build him bridges toward other marriages with the patient generosity of a matchmaker working flat against her own apparent interest. Everyone wins in theory, except that no one can ever be told the reason why. He leaves at 4, hopeful as ever, the grapes accepted, the sermons admired, the date still pleasantly unspecified. You watch the curricle round the corner and feel the peculiar fatigue of a battle that must simply be fought again next week, with no available victory except endless graceful delay. Then you climb the stairs, take out her last letter, and remember exactly what it is you are protecting. You have been offered, in tones of great kindness, a future. You may marry a man chosen for you, or you may be sent to a convent, or you may stay home as an unpaid aunt, managing someone else's children. These are the doors. Each one closes around a life you do not want, and the trick the era plays is presenting them as generosity. You are dealing this morning with the slow and exhausting work of refusing all 3 at once without appearing ungrateful, mad, or in urgent need of correction. The doors are presented one at a time, always by someone who loves you, which is exactly what makes them so hard to slam. Your father favours the marriage, naturally, since the marriage closes a column in his ledger. Your mother leans toward the spinster aunt arrangement, because it keeps you home, useful, and within easy reach of correction. And somewhere behind both hovers the convent, spoken of in lowered tones as the thing that happens to girls who simply will not be sensible. 3 exits, 3 cages, and a family convinced it is being generous by letting you pick the bars. Marriage you understand best, because you have watched it up close. You have seen what a wife becomes the morning after the wedding, when her money, her name, and her legal self all dissolve into her husband like sugar into tea. The law calls this coverture and calls it protection. You have decided it looks far more like a respectable disappearing act. The bride sawn neatly in half and only the husband ever reassembled. No, thank you. You have plans for both your halves. The convent at least has the decency to be honest about being a cage. Stone walls, a locked gate, a life of prayer and obedience, and the great unspoken bonus, from your family's view, of putting a whole continent between you and a certain correspondent. Aunt Maud raises it gently over the embroidery, the way one offers a difficult medicine. You decline just as gently. You have no quarrel with God. Your quarrel is purely with the architecture. which leaves the third door, the soft one, disguised as no decision at all. You may simply stay. You may become the maiden aunt, the useful unmarried woman in the spare room who is endlessly grateful, who minds other people's children and embroiders other people's initials and slowly, comfortably, stops being a person with a life of her own. It is the door they expect you to drift through by default, the way water finds the lowest ground. Now comes the genuinely hard part, which is that refusal must wear good manners or it will not survive a week. You cannot rage. A raging woman gets diagnosed, dosed, and managed into silence. You must instead become immovable while staying perfectly pleasant, a smiling stone in the middle of the parlour, agreeing warmly with everyone's concern for your happiness and then declining, again, to do anything whatsoever about it. It is the hardest performance you give, precisely because it has to look like no performance at all. Your great ally is the maddening slowness of the machine itself. Families tire. Every season you remain unmarried, uncloistered, and unhelpfully cheerful is a season your relatives invest a little less hope in fixing you. You are not winning a battle so much as outlasting a siege, one mild refusal at a time, turning down grapes and convents and spare rooms with the same unshakable smile. And the whole while, you carry a fourth door in your head, the one nobody offered because nobody believes it exists, a small house, a shared income, a life arranged entirely around the one person you would actually choose, in a quiet corner of the country where two women keeping house is simply a fact and not a question. It is the only door you want, and the cruel joke of your life is that you must build it yourself, in secret, while smiling your way out of all the others. So you smile, you decline, you wait. And you keep the plan folded small, somewhere no one thinks to look. You sit down to write to her, and the challenge is not feeling, it is engineering. Every word you want to set down is true and dangerous, so you must build a letter that carries the whole weight of what you mean while remaining, on its surface, the fond note of one friend to another. You write "my beloved" because the age permits it. You write of longing because friends are allowed to long. The art is loading ordinary sentences until they nearly buckle, then folding the paper before anyone reads over your shoulder. You begin, as always, with the salutation, which is the first place the smuggling happens. "My dearest," you write, and then you pause, because dearest is permitted, dearest is what one school friend calls another, and yet on this page, to this woman, dearest is carrying freight it was never built for. The whole language of female friendship is a set of perfectly legal containers, and your craft is filling them well past their rated capacity without the seams ever showing. The trick the era hands you, without meaning to, is that nobody polices warmth between women. A man writing this letter would be a scandal in an envelope. You, writing the identical words, are merely affectionate, and affectionate is encouraged, applauded, held up as proof of a tender feminine heart. So you pour everything into the gap between what the words say and what they mean, and you trust her to read the difference. You taught each other this alphabet. Consider how much can ride on a single underlined word. You write that you think of her often, and you underline often just once, lightly, and that small stroke of ink does work a whole paragraph could not. You write that the house feels empty without her, which is the plain truth and also a confession. And the beauty of it is that the plain truth gives perfect cover to the confession standing directly behind it. Every sentence does two jobs at once. Only one of the jobs is ever visible. There is an art, too, in what you save for the postscript, because the reading eye relaxes at a postscript. The body of the letter can be all news and weather and dutiful inquiries after her mother's chest cold. Then, almost as an afterthought, squeezed in below your name where it looks like spillover rather than the entire purpose, you set down the line you actually sat to write. I count the days. It reads like impatience to see a friend. It is nothing of the kind, and she will know it the instant her eye drops to the foot of the page. Mind the practical hazards, which are many. Letters get read. A careless maid, a curious brother, a mother who treats her daughter's correspondence as her own jurisdiction, any of them might unfold this page over breakfast. So you write nothing that could not, at a pinch, be explained away as the ordinary fervour of friendship. You keep the deniability stitched into every line like a hidden seam, so the letter could be read aloud at the family table and raise nothing worse than a remark that you two are awfully devoted, aren't you? Miss Tabitha Ord, 3 houses down, writes letters of exactly this temperature to a woman in Bath, and nobody so much as blinks, because Tabitha is simply known to be a great one for friendship. You have studied her technique the way a forger studies a signature. The entire county runs on letters like these, thick as autumn leaves, crossing and recrossing under the serene official belief that they contain nothing but fondness. You have hidden an entire marriage inside that belief. You read it back once, checking the seams. You hold it near the candle, not to burn it, only to see it whole in the warm light, this small paper vessel built to carry a forbidden cargo through a customs house that has decided, in advance, that your cargo cannot possibly exist. Then you fold it, seal it with a drop of wax, and send your heart through the public post in plain disguise. Her letter arrives folded small, the postage saved by writing crosswise over her own lines until the page is a grid of devotion. You take it to the window to read, and you read it the way only you can, because the warmth that a stranger would file under friendship is, to you, a series of precise signals. The word she underlined, the line she repeated, the thing she did not quite say but circled 3 times. You are decoding a document that was written very deliberately to look like nothing at all. You take it to the window because the window has the best light and the worst sight lines for anyone standing behind you. Her hand is small and crossed, the lines running first one way and then turned a square corner and written over again, a thrifty lattice that saves her the price of a second sheet and happens to make the page unreadable to anyone skimming over your shoulder. You have read her crossing for years. To you it is not a tangle. It is a private room with the door pulled gently to. The surface news is ordinary, and you move through it quickly, the way you would cross a familiar hall to reach the one room you came for. The garden is doing well. Her aunt is tedious. The new curate preaches too long and pronounces Corinthians as though it owed him money. All of this is true, all of it is cover, and all of it exists so the real letter can travel safely folded inside the ordinary one, like a love note tucked into a grocery list. Then you reach the signals, and you slow right down. There is a word she has underlined, and underlining from her is never decoration. It is the lift of an eyebrow rendered in ink. There is a sentence she has plainly written and then not crossed out, when she crosses out nearly everything, which means she wanted you to see the hesitation as much as the words. And there is the place she writes, "You know what I mean," and simply stops, trusting you to finish it, because the most dangerous half of the sentence is the half she has left for you to supply yourself. What a stranger would file under friendship, you read as a set of small, precise and deliberate instruments. Tenderness, to the untrained eye. Coordinates, to you. She mentions, without seeming to mention it, that she will be at her cousin's house in October, and that the blue room there has a very comfortable window seat, and the whole idle little detail is in fact an invitation with a date and an address attached. The brilliance of the method is that it cannot be confiscated, because there is nothing in it to seize. The meaning lives in the spaces, and you cannot arrest a space. Mrs. Hubbard, who sorts the post in the village, has held this very letter in her hand and learned absolutely nothing from it, which is exactly the point. Mrs. Hubbard licks her thumb, squints at the direction, and passes across the counter a document she believes to be one lady's fond chatter to another. You thank her warmly. You always thank her warmly. She is, without ever knowing it, the most reliable courier your heart has ever employed. You read it a second time, then a third, the way you return to a warm stove on a cold day. The third reading is simply to be near her, since the letter is the closest thing to her presence you are allowed to keep in a drawer. You can hear her voice in the rhythm of it. Then you do the prudent thing, and the painful one in a single motion. You read it once more to set it in memory. And then, because letters that survive are letters that someday convict, you hold the corner to the flame and watch October, and the blue room and the window seat curl into ash, keeping nothing but what you have already hidden somewhere no fire and no brother will ever reach. You first hear the word at a card table, dropped by a woman who does not know you are listening. Saphist, she says, the way you might name a rare and slightly alarming bird. You file it away. Over the following months you collect the rest of the vocabulary the way other people collect recipes. Tommy, said with a sneer, the sly mention of the game of flats. Nobody has explained any of it to you. You are assembling, from scraps of overheard contempt, the first map you have ever been given of yourself. The word lands at the card table like a dropped coin, and you do not look up. Mrs. Fanshawe says it to Mrs. Greaves over the whist. Saphist. with a particular relish people save for a word they think too clever for the room. They are discussing someone in town, a lady who keeps another lady's company a little too devotedly, and they roll the word around like a sweet with a sharp centre. You keep your eyes on your cards. You have just learned something enormous about yourself from two women who would faint to know they had taught it to you. This is how the whole vocabulary reaches you, never as instruction, always as gossip. Nobody sits a girl down and explains that there is a name for the way her heart leans. Instead, the words arrive second-hand, smuggled inside disapproval, dropped at tea, hissed in a doorway, printed in a coarse pamphlet that someone left where it should not have been left. You become a quiet scholar of the contemptuous aside. Take Tommy, which you collect a fortnight later from a stable boy who has no idea what he is even saying. It is the low word, the gutter twin of the polite one, and it comes wrapped in a laugh rather than a learned nod to a Greek poet. Then there is the game of flats, which you assemble slowly out of context and one mortifying joke, and which turns out to mean precisely what you had begun to fear it meant. None of these words is kind. Every one of them is useful. A name you can hate is still a name, and a name is the first thing you have ever been handed that actually fits. There is a strange double feeling in the collecting. On the one hand, each of these words is a small, sharp, and deliberate wound. They exist to shame women like you, and they do their work. On the other hand, each one is also proof. If there is a word, there have been others. If there is a whole vocabulary, then you are not a single inexplicable flaw in the design of the world. You are a recognized kind of person, common enough to require slang. The very contempt that polishes these words also confirms that you are not alone. Old Miss Pinnock, your former governess, comes nearest to actually helping, and even she does it sideways. She presses a small book of poems into your hands one grey afternoon, says only that the ancients understood certain feelings rather better than we do, taps the cover twice with one bent finger, and turns the conversation to the weather before you can find a reply. That double tap is the closest thing to a blessing anyone will offer you for years. You understand it perfectly. You say nothing at all. You take the book, so you assemble your map from fragments, the way a traveller pieces a country together from torn pages of 3 different atlases. A polite word here, a crude word there, a poet's hint, a stable boy's joke, a governess's 2 taps on a worn cover. None of it adds up to permission, but it adds up to existence, which is the thing you actually needed all along, the quiet and enormous fact that what you are has a shape, and a past, and a name in more than one register of the language. Whatever else may be true tonight, you are not the first of your kind. The gossips have just told you so. You kneel for confession and you perform a small, careful act of omission. The church has a word for what you feel, but the word is silent sin, and the silence is the entire point. The clergy have decided that the surest way to prevent this particular sin is to never describe it, in case description gives anyone ideas. So you are not asked. You are not warned. You confess the ordinary things, the temper and the vanity, and you walk back out absolved of everything except the one thing nobody in the building will name. The priest who hears you is Father Brennan, and Father Brennan has a list. He works through it the way a customs officer works through a trunk, lifting each item, holding it to the light, asking whether there is anything else to declare. Pride, yes. Envy, a little. Did you honour your parents this week, more or less? He has a question for every sin the church has bothered to name, and the church, in its wisdom, has declined to name yours, which means no question on his list can possibly reach it. The official catalogue runs to exactly 7 named deadly sins, and yours, conveniently, is not among them. This is the silent sin working exactly as designed. The theologians decided, long ago, that the safest way to handle the love between women was to refuse to describe it from the pulpit, on the theory that a sin no one mentions is a sin no one imagines, and a sin no one imagines is a sin no one commits. It is a strategy with one enormous flaw, which is that it does not work, and one accidental mercy, which is that it leaves you a clear path through confession every single week. So you make your offerings of small, true, and manageable sins. You were short with the cook. You coveted Mrs. Darcy's new pelisse. You let your attention wander during the sermon, which, given the sermon, is less a sin than a survival reflex. Father Brennan absolves you of all of it with the calm efficiency of a man stamping the correct papers and you rise from your knees lighter by precisely the weight of everything you were willing to mention. The one thing you carry out exactly as heavy as you carried it in is the love itself. And here is the part you have never told anyone. You do not actually feel it as a sin. You have looked for the guilt the church would presumably want, turned over your own heart the way you would turn over a stone expecting beetles, and found underneath only tenderness and a kind of stubborn peace. The vocabulary of damnation simply slides off it. Whatever this is, it does not match the shape of the things you are taught to confess. There is a logic here you have worked out and would never say aloud. If the church will not name the thing, the church cannot quite condemn the thing, not to your face, not in a form you are required to answer. The silence meant to smother you has instead handed you a loophole roughly the size of a cathedral door. You walk through it on Sundays, head bowed, perfectly sincere about the cook and the police, and perfectly untouched in the one place that matters. Mrs. Dauncey, 2 pews ahead, dabs her eyes through the whole service, audibly moved by a God she is sure is watching her very closely. You almost envy her the simplicity of it. Her sins are all on the list. She can lay every one of them down and walk out clean, with nothing left over that the language refuses to hold. You walk out with one thing still in your arms, the thing with no name and no box to be confessed into. It is not heavy, exactly. It is just yours, and unspeakable, and entirely uncondemned, carried home through the churchyard in the cold, bright morning like something you were never quite told you were allowed to keep. You are introduced to her at someone's evening party, and the introduction is doing far more work than anyone else in the room realizes. Women who love women do not advertise. You find each other through a slow, deniable system of mutual friends, careful remarks, and the right book left on the right table. Someone trusted has decided that you two should meet. You shake hands. You talk about the weather and the music, and underneath the small talk you are both running the same quiet test, trying to read whether the other is, like you, fluent in a language nobody teaches. The woman doing the introducing is Lady Carmody, and Lady Carmody is far more than a hostess. She is, though no plaque will ever say so, a kind of switchboard, quietly connecting the right people across her drawing room with the deniable skill of a woman who has been arranging exactly these meetings for 30 years. She steers you toward the newcomer with a handlight on your elbow, says only that she thinks you two will have a great deal to talk about, and drifts away before either of you can ask what she meant. What follows is an interview conducted entirely in code, and you are both fluent. You mention a book. She mentions she has read it. You note, mildly, which character you found most interesting, and the character you name is doing more work than the rest of the sentence. She answers in the same register, a shade of emphasis here, a held glance there, the conversational equivalent of 2 ships exchanging signals across a harbour while loudly pretending to admire the weather. Now consider how much depends on getting this wrong, because the cost of a misread is not small. Guess right, and you have found a friend, perhaps far more than a friend, in a world that offered you neither. Guess wrong, and you have handed a stranger a piece of yourself she can carry straight to the nearest gossip. So the whole exchange is built on plausible retreat. Every signal you send can be explained away as ordinary conversation if her answering signal never comes. You advance 1 deniable inch at a time, ready at any second to pretend you are only ever discussing literature. The room helps without knowing it. To everyone watching, 2 ladies have struck up a warm, wholesome, and entirely respectable acquaintance over a novel, which is precisely the sort of connection a party exists to produce. The chaperones approve. The mothers approve. Nobody sees the second conversation running underneath the first like a stream beneath ice. You praise the author. She praises the binding. You hold each other's eyes a half-second too long, and the room pours the tea and notices nothing at all. By the time the tea is brought round, you know. You cannot say how you know, only that the knowledge has settled the way certainty does, complete and quiet. She knows too, nothing has been declared. No line has been crossed that a hostile witness could name, and yet a door has opened between you that will not close again, built entirely out of a book, a glance, and the careful art of saying almost nothing at all. You exchange the ordinary courtesies of parting, the hope that you will meet again soon, the small bow, the polite nothing. To the room it is 2 new friends being pleasant. To the 2 of you it is an address quietly agreed, a promise to continue a conversation that has not, on the surface, even properly begun. And somewhere across the room Lady Carmody catches your eye for a quarter second, reads your face in that quarter second, and allows herself the smallest possible smile of a job well done before turning back to her other guests. You reach, with great casualness, for a particular book. This is your instrument. You mention an author, or a poem, or a story that brushes against love between women, and then you do the real work, which is watching her face very closely. Does she flinch and change the subject? Does she go still? Does something flicker that tells you she has read it too, and understood it the way you did? The whole interrogation is conducted in pleasantries over tea, and she may never know it happened. You are gauging, in seconds, whether it is safe to hope. The book you choose matters, and you keep a small private shelf of instruments for exactly this purpose. Nothing too obvious. A volume that announces itself would announce you along with it. You want something with a passage that reads two ways, a poem about devoted friendship that leans, if you tilt it, into something warmer, a classical tale the educated will recognize and the incurious will not. The poet Sappho is the sharpest tool in the drawer, but you save her for when you are nearly sure, because to name Sappho aloud is to lay most of your cards on the table at once. So you open lightly, you mention the book the way you would mention the weather, and then your real attention drops to her face, where the actual conversation is about to happen. You have become an expert reader of the small, involuntary, and telling things. The half-second of stillness, the flush that climbs and is hastily blamed on the warmth of the room, the flicker of recognition a person cannot fully hide because it fires before the mind can catch it. There are three faces she might make, and you tell them apart like a physician reading a pulse. There is blankness, which means she has no idea what you are circling, and you simply talk on about the prose and let the matter close with no harm done. There is discomfort, the slight recoil, which means she suspects and disapproves, and you note it and steer hard for safer water. And then there is the third face, the one you are hoping for, the quick lift of interest she tries to tuck away too late, the answer arriving before she has decided to give it. The whole interrogation is remarkably civilized, conducted over tea and seed cake. There are no demands, no confessions, no dangerous words said plainly. To anyone passing the open door, two women are discussing literature with unusual attention, which is the most respectable activity the era can picture for them. You are, in fact, performing the most delicate reconnaissance of your life, and your only weapon is a book of poems and the steadiness of your own gaze. You have grown very good at this, far better than you ever wanted to be, because the cost of being bad at it does not bear thinking about. Mrs. Ashby, who taught you half of this without ever once saying so, used to call it casting a line and waiting for the water to move. She would mention an author, settle back with her cup, and watch the surface of a new acquaintance for the smallest ripple. Most of the time the water stayed flat, and she would reel the line in and try again another season, patient as a heron. Now and then it moved, and a whole friendship surfaced from a single, well-chosen page. Today the water moves. She names a second poem before you can, and as she says the title she meets your eyes directly, just for a moment, and lets you see that she knows precisely what the two of you are doing. You smile, and you pour her more tea, and you put the book gently back on the shelf. You will not need it again with her. You sit up late to write the day down, and before you record the part that matters, you switch alphabets. The cipher is yours, built years ago with a girl you loved, stitched together from Greek letters, zodiac signs, and little mathematical marks. In plain hand you note the rent, the weather, the sermon. Then, in the code only you can read, you set down the rest, who you wanted, what was said, what was done in the dark. You are keeping the most honest record of a life that the surrounding century has firmly agreed not to permit. The cipher is not elegant, and that is rather the point. You built it as a girl with the first girl you ever loved, two heads bent over a candle inventing a private country out of stray symbols, and like most things made by lovers, it is held together more by intention than by genius. A scatter of Greek letters stands in for the vowels. Zodiac signs and little crosses and curls do the rest. To anyone who lifts the volume, it looks like the margin scribbling of a woman who studied too much mathematics and went strange with it, which is, conveniently, a reputation you do not entirely mind having. Every night the same small ceremony. You write the public day first, in a plain round hand any magistrate could read. The rent came in. The grey mare is lame. The sermon was on humility and ran to 40 minutes, which is its own quiet comment on the preacher. Then you reach the part the plain hand cannot hold and your pen shifts, almost without deciding to, into the other alphabet, the way your voice would drop if you were speaking aloud in a room with thin walls. In the code, you are completely honest, perhaps the only place in your whole life where you are. You set down who you wanted and whether she wanted you back. You record the conversation that turned, the hand that did not pull away, the precise hour the thing you had hoped for quietly happened. You keep accounts of your own heart with the same exactness you bring to the estate ledgers, because you have decided that a life lived in disguise deserves at least one true record, even if only one pair of eyes will ever read it. There is a danger in it, of course, and you are not blind to it. A coded diary is still a diary. The volumes pile up on the shelf, year after year, a confession growing fat in plain sight, protected by nothing but the difficulty of the cipher and the world's assumption that a respectable woman's journal holds nothing worth decoding. You are gambling that the lock holds. You are gambling, really, that no one will ever care enough to try the key. Your maid accordingly dusts the volumes without the faintest idea that she is handling the most dangerous books in the county. She lines them up by height, straightens their spines, and complains that the ink gets everywhere, on your cuffs, on your fingers, on the pillowcases. You apologize for the ink and say nothing about what it spells. She thinks you a tidy, scholarly, and harmless sort of lady with an unfortunate habit of writing in bed. She is half right, which is the safest thing for her to be. And yet you cannot stop, and you do not want to. There is a stubborn defiance in the writing you would not surrender for any amount of safety. The century has agreed that your life does not exist, cannot exist, must not be spoken, and every night you sit up and prove it wrong in your own hand, sentence by coded sentence, the truth set down in full and simply locked rather than erased. You finish the entry, you blot it, you close the volume on another day the world refused to permit and you alone refused to forget, and you set it back among its silent, patient brothers. You stand in front of your clothes, and you make a choice that the whole village will read for the rest of your life. You reach past the soft fabrics and the fashionable colours for the dark riding habit, the heavy black wool, the tall beaver hat that men wear. It is more comfortable, yes, and warmer, and far better for walking. But it is also a sentence spoken without words, and you know it perfectly well. Dressing this morning is the closest thing the era gives you to declaring yourself aloud, so you button it slowly and carefully. The soft things hang there in their pale colours, the sprigged muslins and the sky-blue sashes, all of them designed for one purpose, which is to make a young woman look gentle, available, and faintly edible. You have worn them. You know the part they cast you in the moment you put them on, the demure girl waiting to be chosen. This morning, as on most mornings now, you reach past them for the heavy black wool, and the reaching is the most honest thing you will do all day. The riding habit is built like armour and feels like it. The dark cloth, the severe line, the high collar, the long skirt cut for striding rather than drifting. You button it from the throat down with the deliberate care of a soldier dressing for a campaign, because in a sense you are. Every fastening settles you further into yourself and further out of the costume the world keeps trying to put you in. By the time you set the tall beaver hat on your cropped head, you no longer look like anyone's ingenue. The hat is so tall and so black it could rent itself out as a small private chapel. You look like a small, dark, immovable fact. People read it instantly, which is precisely what you intend and precisely what it costs you. The village does not have your private vocabulary, but it has eyes, and eyes are quite enough. A woman dressed like this announces that she does not intend to be courted, managed, or rearranged, and the announcement travels faster than any words could. Some read it as eccentricity, some read it as arrogance. A sharp few read it correctly, and you watch their faces change, and you let them. There is a freedom in the costume the pale muslins never offered, and a good deal of it is simply physical. You can walk. You can stride across a muddy field without ruining 3 layers of delicate fabric. You can climb a stile, sit a horse properly, stand out in the rain, do any of the 100 plain, daily, and ordinary things the gentle dresses quietly forbade. The clothes that mark you as strange are also the clothes that let you live inside your own body, and you've decided the strangeness is a price well worth paying for the use of your own legs. Old Thwaite, the gardener, touches his cap to you each morning with exactly the gruff respect he would give the master of a house, and you suspect he is the only person for miles who has simply, quietly decided to take you at the value you have set on yourself. He does not puzzle over you. He hands you the good walking stick, remarks on the frost, and gets back to the hedges. There is a whole sermon in the way Thwaite touches his cap, and the sermon is that some people will meet you exactly where you stand. You catch yourself in the glass on the way out, the dark shape, the hard line of the hat, and you feel the thing you came here to feel. Not prettiness, not invitation, recognition. The figure in the glass is, at last, the one that matches the person living inside the wool. You take the stick from Thwaite, you nod to the frost, and you walk out into a day you will spend as yourself, dressed in the closest thing to honesty the era will let you wear in public. Your morning has a shape, and the shape is a quiet daily argument with what a woman is supposed to be. You crop your hair shorter than is fashionable, you powder it plain, you skip the small softening tricks other women spend an hour on, the careful curls and the strategic ribbons meant to advertise availability. Getting dressed, for you, is not preparation to be chosen by a man. It is preparation to walk out into a day you fully intend to run yourself. Every choice at the glass is a small, repeated, deliberate refusal. Your maid for this is Becca, and Becca was trained on other young ladies, the kind who required an hour and a hot iron and approximately 40 pins to be made fit for the world. With you she has had to unlearn nearly everything. You wave away the curling tongs. You wave away the false flowers, the ribbons threaded to catch the light, the entire apparatus designed to turn a face into a shop window. Becca, to her credit, has stopped sighing about it, and now simply asks plain or plainer, as though taking an order at an inn. The hair goes short, shorter than is quite decent, brushed back from the face instead of arranged to frame it. There is a logic to it beyond the comfort, though the comfort is real. Long elaborate hair is a flag of availability. It says here is a woman with the leisure and the intent to be looked at. Cropping it is a way of taking the flag down. Every inch you do not curl is an inch you are not offering, and the small cold scissors do more plain speaking each week than you could manage in a year of careful sentences. The face you leave alone, which is its own small scandal. No paint, no careful pinching of the cheeks, none of the soft deceptions that turn a tired woman into a blooming one. You meet the day with the face you actually have, which strikes the other women as either laziness or defiance, and is, in honest truth, a little of both. You are not preparing to be appraised. You have removed yourself from the market, and a face arranged for buyers is simply wasted effort on a woman who has taken down her own sign. Then the hands. And the hands are the real giveaway. You keep your nails short and your grip firm, hands for holding reins and turning pages and gripping a walking stick, not the soft, idle and useless hands of a lady waiting to be helped down from a carriage. People notice hands. A suitor once took yours and visibly recalculated, feeling the strength in it, the lack of trembling delicacy, and you watched the sum go wrong behind his eyes with a satisfaction you knew better than to show. All these small refusals add up to something larger, performed every single morning before the world is even awake. Alone, each is nothing, a matter of a ribbon declined or a curl skipped. Together, repeated daily across years, they amount to a quiet and total resignation from the role you were assigned at birth. You are not making a scene. You are simply, methodically, at the glass each dawn, declining to become the woman they once sketched for you. Becca pins the last plain thing into place, steps back, and tells you that you look very well, which from Becca means you look like yourself, which is the only compliment that has ever truly meant anything. She has come, over the years, to take a strange small pride in your plainness, as though she alone is in on the joke. You rise from the glass dressed for a day of your own choosing, having fought and won, before breakfast, the smallest and most important battle of the morning. You exchange rings, and there is no clergyman, no register, no witness who would understand what they were seeing. The ceremony is entirely yours, invented out of necessity and conducted in private. A ring slid onto a finger, a lock of hair sealed under glass, a vow spoken with no legal weight whatsoever. The state will never record this. The church will never bless it, and yet you treat it as binding, completely binding, because the only authority that recognizes this marriage is the two of you, and you have decided that this is authority enough. You hold the ring in your palm before you give it, a small plain band that cost more than you should have spent and means more than money could measure. There is no script for this. No prayer book prints the words two women say to each other when they decide to belong to one another for good. So you have written your own, quietly, the two of you, borrowing a phrase here from the marriage service and inventing the rest. It is a ceremony assembled out of pure necessity, and it is no less binding for being homemade. You say the words in a low voice. in a locked room, with the curtains drawn against a grey, quiet and indifferent afternoon. She says hers back. There is no congregation to weep, no organ, no father to give anyone away, which is just as well, since the entire point is that nobody is giving you away to anybody. You give yourselves to each other by your own authority, which is the only authority that has ever taken the two of you seriously. Consider what you are doing, legally, which is precisely nothing. The state will not record it. The church would refuse it outright if you were mad enough to ask. In the eyes of every institution in the land, this moment simply does not occur, and these rings simply do not exist. And yet you slide the band onto her finger and feel the floor of your life shift, because you have stopped waiting for permission from bodies that will never grant it and started building on the only ground available, which is your own word freely given. There are tokens beyond the rings, because you are both sentimental in the practical way of people who must hide their feelings and so pour them into objects instead. A lock of her hair, sealed under a little disc of glass, to be worn where no one will think to ask about it. A book inscribed on the flyleaf in language just ambiguous enough to survive a curious cousin. Small private monuments to a marriage that exists everywhere except on paper, scattered through your belongings like a code only the two of you can read. Your one witness, if you can call her that, is the woman who keeps your secrets, and she waits just outside the door, neither summoned nor sent away. When you emerge, she says nothing, only takes your cloaks, and then lights a single candle in the hall window, the way one marks a feast day, and goes quietly back to her work. It lands heavier than any bishop's blessing could. She, at least, knows exactly what has just happened in that room, and she approves of it. You both know the limits of what you have done. A vow with no force behind it can be broken with no penalty. The rings protect nothing, secure nothing, compel nothing. What they do is simpler, and you have decided enough. They mark the moment you chose each other on purpose and out loud, in a world that gave you no machinery for choosing. So you built the machinery yourselves out of two plain bands and one stubborn afternoon. You look at your hand, you look at hers. The afternoon goes on outside, indifferent as ever. And inside the locked room, two women are, by every measure that has ever mattered to them, married. Not legally, not anywhere a clerk could ever find them, but married all the same. You are planning to disappear together, and disappearing is much harder than the novels make it sound. There is money to gather quietly, a route to choose, a servant to trust, a bag to pack without the household noticing. You have seriously considered male clothes for the road, because two women travelling alone draw questions a young man never would. You go over the plan again in your head while passing the soup, calm on the surface, calculating underneath. The escape has to work the very first time, because a failed elopement is the kind of thing families spend years correcting. The money is the first and hardest piece, because money is the one thing the world has carefully kept out of your hands. You have been squirreling it away for months, a coin skimmed from the housekeeping here, a small sum begged from a sympathetic relative there, all of it hidden in a place you check far more often than you should. It is not much. It is freedom measured in shillings, and you count it the way a prisoner counts the bars he has managed to loosen. The route you have studied until you could walk it blind. Which coach leaves when? Which inn will take two women without a chaperone and ask no awkward questions? Which road runs quietest in the grey, cold, and silent hour before the house wakes? You have considered, seriously, dressing as men for the journey, because a young gentleman and his companion draw no eye at all, while two unescorted women draw every eye on the road. The breeches are folded at the bottom of the bag, just in case the disguise proves simpler than the explanations. Then there is the servant, your one indispensable accomplice, because no escape of this kind has ever succeeded without a loyal pair of hands on the inside. Hers are Susan's. Susan will carry the packed bag out to the lane while the household sleeps, will delay the discovery by an hour with a story about a headache and a closed door, will look the searching family in the eye, and lie with the flat calm of a woman who has decided exactly where her loyalty sits. You are trusting Susan with your whole future, and the strange part is you trust her more easily than you would ever trust a man at an altar. The performance you must give in the meantime is the hardest acting of your life. You pass the soup. You discuss the weather and your cousin's engagement and the price of candles, smiling, ordinary, entirely present, while underneath the table your mind walks the coach road for the 100th time. A single twitch of nerves, one glance held a beat too long with your fellow conspirator across the table, and the whole thing collapses before it begins. So you are calm. You are aggressively, convincingly calm. The danger is not the law, because no law forbids what you are doing. The danger is the family, and the family is worse than the law, because the family can act without any law at all. A failed elopement does not end in a courtroom. It ends in a locked room, a doctor consulted, a convent quietly arranged, a daughter spoken of afterward only in lowered voices. You have seen it happen to others. You are staking everything on the first attempt precisely because there will almost certainly be no second. So you go over it once more in the dark, lying awake beside the future you are about to seize. The bag, the coins, the coach. Susan at the lane, the breeches folded just in case, every piece in its place, the whole fragile machine wound tight and waiting for the hour before dawn. And in the morning, while the house still sleeps and last night's ordinary performance is barely cold, you rise, you dress, and you walk out of one life and toward another, with everything you own in a single bag and everything you want walking quietly at your side. You have been caught, dragged home and seated in a room full of relatives doing their very best impression of concern. They want to know what you were thinking. They want to know whether you are ill, deceived, or simply ungrateful. What they cannot accept is the plain answer that you and she intend to live together and that nothing else will do. So the negotiation begins and you discover the one real weapon you actually have, which is refusal. You will not marry. You will not be corrected. You simply, calmly, immovably, will not budge an inch. The room has been arranged like a small tribunal, though everyone in it would be wounded to hear it called that. Your father at the centre, gravely disappointed. Your mother beside him, dabbing and reproachful. An uncle summoned for moral weight. They have set their chairs in a loose half-circle around yours, and the geometry alone tells you everything you need to know. You are the matter to be resolved, and they are the committee appointed to resolve you. They begin gently, because gentleness is the first instrument. Were you frightened? Were you misled? Did she put you up to it, this friend of yours, this unsuitable influence, because surely no daughter of theirs would conceive such a thing on her own? You watch them reach, one after another, for any explanation that lets the blame fall somewhere outside you, somewhere correctable. Each explanation is a door they are holding open, hoping you will walk through it and become, once more, a girl who simply lost her way. You decline all the doors, and you do it without ever raising your voice, because you learned long ago that volume is what gets a woman dismissed. A daughter who weeps can be soothed, a daughter who rages can be dosed and confined. But a daughter who answers every question calmly, agrees that yes, she quite understands their concern, and then quietly restates that she will not marry and will not be parted from her friend, is a far harder problem, because there is nothing in her to treat. You are not hysterical. You are simply, immovably decided. This is the one weapon they fail to account for, and it is the only weapon you have. You cannot out-argue them. The arguments are all written in their favour. You cannot outrank them. They hold the money, the roof, the law, the entire architecture of the family. What you can do is refuse, and keep refusing, and make the cost of breaking you higher than the cost of simply letting you go. It is not a battle of strength. It is a siege, and the besieged, now and then, simply outlast the army at the wall. Your married sister, Lavinia, tries the sharpest blow of the afternoon, leaning forward to remind you, kindly, of everything you are throwing away, the children you will never have, the protection of a husband, the ordinary, respectable happiness she herself enjoys. She means it as a rescue. You look at Lavinia, at the careful brightness she has worn since her own wedding, the brightness of a woman talking herself daily into a life, and you find, to your own surprise, that you pity her rather more than she pities you. You do not say so. It would be cruel, and it would also give the whole game away. Hours pass this way, the same questions circling, the same refusals meeting them, until the room runs out of energy long before you run out of no. That is the secret nobody warns the family about. Indignation is exhausting, and you have nothing to do but sit and decline, which costs you a great deal less than their performance costs them. By evening something has shifted, not toward approval, never that, but toward fatigue, toward the first faint outline of surrender. They have not blessed you. They have simply begun, at last, to grasp that you cannot be moved, and that grasp, in a family with no law on its side, is the closest thing to victory you are ever going to be given. You are negotiating for money, which is the least romantic and the most important part of building a life with her. You will not inherit as a son would. You cannot earn as a man would. The independence you want runs entirely on whatever allowance your family can be persuaded to settle on you, and so you bargain, gently and relentlessly, for a small yearly sum. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is the whole difference between living on your own terms in a cottage and living forever under someone else's roof and rules. The conversation happens in your father's study, the room where the family's money lives, and is discussed in the lowered, serious and reverent tone money seems to require. You have chosen the moment carefully, after a good dinner, when he is mellow, and you make your case the way you would put forward any reasonable business proposal, because you have learned that reasonable is the most disarming word in the language coming from a daughter. You are not asking for adventure. You are asking, you say, for a modest and sensible independence. The arithmetic is humiliating, and you do not let it show. A son in your place would simply inherit. The land, the name, the income would flow to him by right, no asking required. A man with no fortune could go and earn one, in trade or the church or the army, in 100 doors that stand open to him and shut to you. You can do neither. You cannot inherit, and you cannot earn, which leaves you the single remaining avenue, the one that requires you to sit in this study and persuade a man to part with a little of what he was always going to keep. So you bargain gently and relentlessly, which is the only register available to you. You name a figure. He winces at it. You explain calmly how little it truly is, how respectably 2 women might live on it in some quiet and inexpensive corner, how much cheaper, frankly, you are than a wedding with its settlements and its lifelong obligations. You have, rather cunningly, made yourself the economical option, and you watch the thought land, watch him begin to weigh a small yearly sum against the far larger cost of a daughter who simply will not be married off. What hangs on the figure is everything, though you keep your voice level as you fight for it. Too little, and you remain forever a guest in other people's houses, dependent, correctable, your life lived at the sufferance of whoever currently holds the spare room. Enough, even barely enough, and you can take a cottage, hire a single servant, close your own front door, and answer to no one. The entire distance between those 2 futures is a matter of pounds per year, so you fight for the pounds the way other women fight for love, because for you, in this study, the pounds are the love made possible. Your Aunt Honoria, who controls a little money of her own and never married either, turns out to be your secret ally, and she fights far dirtier than you ever could. Aunt Honoria has spent 40 years turning the world's low expectations of spinsters into room to move, and she knows a fellow campaigner the moment she sees one. In the end, you get less than you asked and more than you feared, which is how every honest negotiation concludes. It is not generosity. It is a settlement, a price the family pays to make a problem walk quietly away, and you take it gladly, because a problem that walks away on a small annual income is exactly the problem you have been trying to become. You leave the study with a figure agreed and a door, at last, propped open. It is not much money. It is, you understand perfectly, the whole foundation of every free day you will ever have, and you would have bargained twice as hard for half as much. You and she are setting up a household with no template to follow, because every household either of you has ever seen had a husband at the centre of it. So you invent the arrangement as you go along. One of you keeps the accounts and argues with the tradesman. One of you runs the kitchen and the long correspondence. You divide the labour not by sex, since you are both women, but by temperament, by who is simply better at what. It is, very quietly, one of the most radical things about your life. A home built entirely around 2 people who chose each other. The cottage is small and it is yours, which are the 2 facts that matter. And the first thing you discover is how much of marriage was actually just logistics waiting to be reassigned. Every household you grew up in organised itself around a husband, his comfort, his schedule, his authority over the accounts. Yours has no such centre, and so you build it around something stranger and steadier, the 2 of you, deciding together, each morning, who does what and exactly why. You divide the work, and the dividing is its own quiet revolution, because you divide it by aptitude and nothing else. She has the better head for figures, so she keeps the accounts and does battle with the butcher over his arithmetic. You have the patience for the garden and the long correspondence, so those fall to you. Neither of you defers to the other on principle, because there is no principle anywhere that says one woman in a house must outrank the other. You negotiate, you trade, you run the place like two partners in a small and very particular firm. It is unlike a marriage in its very structure, even as it does every practical thing a marriage does. There is no party here whose preferences win by default. When you disagree about the placing of the new bookshelf or the hiring of a girl for the rough work, you actually have to talk it through to a true agreement, because neither of you can simply decree the matter closed. It is more work than obedience. It is also, you find, a great deal more pleasant, this business of being two people who must persuade rather than one who commands and one who yields. The household around you adapts faster than you expected. The girl you hire to help, a sturdy local named Patience, sizes up the arrangement in about a week, files it firmly under harmless eccentric ladies, and gets on with blacking the grate. Patience scrubs the front step each morning on her knees with a brush worn down to a nub, and she has decided in her practical way that two mistresses who pay on time and never shout are a considerable improvement on most houses she might have served in. Her loyalty is not romantic, it is occupational, and it is solid as the step itself. You live simply, on purpose, partly from necessity, and partly because simplicity is privacy, and privacy is the prize. A small life attracts small attention, and small attention is precisely what you are after. Slowly the house becomes a creature with its own character, shaped entirely by the two of you, and answerable to nobody beyond its walls. The books go where you both decide. The hours run to a rhythm you set between you. The fire is lit when you are cold and not when some master's return demands it. It is, in its modest way, one of the most radical arrangements in the county, and its great genius is that from outside it looks like nothing at all, just two friends, sensibly sharing a roof. You sit by that fire in the evening, the accounts balanced, the garden put to bed, the steps scrubbed for morning, and you understand that you have built, out of aptitude and persuasion, and a great deal of stubbornness, the one thing nobody ever offered you, a home with you in the centre of it. You have a servant who knows everything, and your comfort depends entirely on her discretion. She makes the beds, she carries the letters, she sees who sleeps where and says nothing at all, in town or out of it. You pay her, you trust her, and over the years she becomes less a servant than a third pillar of the household, formidable at the gate and utterly immovable against gossip. The whole fragile arrangement rests in part on her silence. So you treat that silence as the precious thing it plainly is, and you never once take it for granted. Her name is Margaret, though behind her back the village calls her the Bruiser, a nickname she earned defending your gate from a debt collector with a broom and a vocabulary that left him paler than when he arrived. She came with you from the very beginning, packed her own small bag the night you packed yours, and has run the practical machinery of your shared life ever since with the grim, dogged, and tireless competence of a quartermaster keeping an army fed in difficult country. What she knows is everything, and what she says is nothing, and the gap between those two facts is the foundation your whole life stands on. She makes the bed, and notices which side is slept in. She carries the letters and recognizes every hand. She has seen, across the years, every tender, unguarded moment a household produces when it believes the servants are not looking, and she has folded all of it away behind a face that gives back precisely nothing. Her discretion is not innocence. It is a decision, renewed daily, and you never forget that it is a decision she could unmake. So you treat the silence as the treasure it is, which means you treat Margaret as a great deal more than a servant. You pay her well, better than you can easily afford. You take her counsel on matters a mistress would never normally discuss with her cook. When she is ill, you nurse her yourself, in a reversal that scandalizes the one neighbour who hears of it, because by now the line between servant and family has worn so thin in your house that nobody inside it bothers to look for it any more. She is the third corner of the household, and the household does not stand without her. At the gate she is magnificent and slightly terrifying. Callers you do not wish to see somehow never quite get past her. She has 100 ways of saying the ladies are not at home, that range from the merely firm to the frankly menacing. A curious cousin, a prying clergyman, a gentleman with questions, all of them meet Margaret first, and most of them decide, on reflection, that their business can wait. She is the moat and the drawbridge both, and she guards the privacy of your love as fiercely as if it were her own. There is a debt here you can never fully repay, and you are honest with yourself about its weight. Your freedom rests in part on the loyalty of a woman who has far less protection in the world than you do, and far more to lose by a careless word. If your secret ever broke, you would suffer. She might starve, turned out without a character into a world that keeps no soft place for an old servant who kept bad company. She carries that risk without complaint, and you carry the knowledge of it, and between you the thing holds. When she finally dies, years from now, you will bury her not in the servant's ground, but in the plot you mean to share yourselves, the three of you together, because the truth your whole life had to disguise is that this was never two women and their maid. It was always three people who built one life, and only one of them was ever paid to stay. For now she is alive and immovable at the gate, broom in hand, turning away the whole world so that the two of you can be, behind her, simply and safely yourselves. You build yourself a routine so full and so disciplined that there is no room left in the day for anyone to pity you. You call it your system, and you keep to it without fail. Mornings for reading aloud and learning languages, afternoons for the garden and the correspondence, evenings for needlework while one of you reads on. You are not filling time. You are constructing a life that answers the unspoken question hanging over two unmarried women, which is, but what will they do with themselves? The answer, it turns out, is everything. On a strict schedule you set yourselves. The danger you are defending against is not scandal exactly. It is pity, which is softer and far more corrosive. The world has a ready story about two unmarried women, and the story is one of emptiness, of withering, of lives that somehow failed to begin. The system is your refutation, built hour by hour. You will not be pitied, because there will be no idle hour for pity to leak into. You fill the day so completely that the question of what your life is for answers itself before anyone can ask it aloud. So the mornings belong to the mind. You read together, often aloud, one of you turning the pages while the other listens and sews, and you have set yourselves a course of study that would shame most gentlemen of your acquaintance. You are teaching yourselves Italian this year, with Spanish promised for the next, purely so you can read certain poets in their own tongue rather than in some translator's polite approximation. There is no examination at the end of this, no degree, no man to be impressed. You do it because two clever women left alone with their own time turn out to be ferociously, almost alarmingly productive. The afternoons go to the garden and the writing desk. You have plans for the grounds that grow more ambitious every season, a new walk laid here, a stand of trees coaxed in there, the modest plot slowly shaped into something people will one day travel to see. And you write letters, a great current of them, flowing out to friends across the country and back again. Your correspondence is your society, and you keep it as carefully as a duchess keeps her salon. The discipline of it is the part outsiders never grasp. The system is not a cage you have built for yourselves. It is the opposite, a scaffolding that holds up a freedom you had to invent out of nothing. Married women have their days dictated for them, shaped around husbands and children, and a household run for someone else's benefit. You have no such structure imposed, which means you must supply your own, and you have chosen to supply one richer and more deliberate than anything that was ever going to be handed to you. Your one regular visitor who truly understands it is old Dr. Ferriar, who calls on his rounds and stays too long over the tea because your conversation is the best he gets all week. Dr. Ferriar peers at your reading list over his spectacles, taps the Italian grammar with one finger, and says every single time that he knows undergraduates at the university who could not keep this pace. He means it as astonishment. You take it as simple accuracy, and you refill his cup. Evening closes the day as deliberately as morning opened it. The needlework comes out, the candles are lit, one of you reads on into the night while the other's needle moves, and the fire settles, and the whole carefully constructed day comes to its quiet, chosen rest. None of it was accidental. Every hour of it was claimed on purpose from a world that expected you to have nothing whatever to do with your hours. You close the book at last. The system has held for another day, and in holding it has done its real work, which was never truly about Italian or gardens or letters, but about building, plank by plank, a life so plainly full that no one can call it empty. You do your most important courting outdoors, in plain view, which is exactly the reason it stays safe. A man and a woman alone in a garden would be an instant scandal. Two women walking the paths, sitting in the little hut roofed with moss at the end of the lawn, heads bent together, are simply taking the air. So the garden becomes your private room with no door at all. You plan the plantings, you walk the same walks, and in the green privacy of being entirely unsuspected, you say the things that could never once be said inside a house full of ears. The arithmetic of suspicion runs entirely in your favour out here, and you have studied it the way a smuggler studies the tides. Indoors, a closed door between two people, is itself a small accusation. Servants notice, walls carry, and privacy looks like something to hide. Outdoors, privacy simply looks like fresh air. Two women strolling the gravel walks, pausing at the little hut roofed with moss at the foot of the lawn, are doing the most wholesome thing the age can picture, and so the one place you are watched least is the one place you stand in plain view. So the garden becomes your true house, the one without walls and therefore without the suspicion walls invite. Plans, promises, the small daily tendernesses a marriage runs on, all of it spoken between the rose beds where a gardener's distant back is the only audience. You have learned to read his position like a clock. While you can see him bent over the far border, you are safe to say anything at all. The little moss-roofed hut at the end of the walk is the heart of it, your one genuinely private, sheltered, and unsuspected room out of doors. To any visitor it looks like a romantic folly, the kind of ornament every fashionable garden sports. To the two of you it is something else entirely, the place where the most important conversations of your life have happened, sheltered from the drizzle and from the household at once. A folly, the world calls it. You have always thought that a perfect name, since the world plainly means something different by the word than you do. A great deal of labour goes into making this innocence look effortless. You really do plan the plantings. The garden is genuinely beautiful, genuinely yours, genuinely the consuming project everyone believes it to be. The cover is not a lie, laid over an empty pretext. It is a true thing that happens to do double duty, a real passion for the soil that also, conveniently, hands you endless honest reasons to be outdoors and alone together for hours. The best disguises you have found are the ones that are also completely sincere. Your gardener, a taciturn man named Hewson, is either entirely innocent or the most discreet soul in the parish, and you have decided it does not matter which. Hewson plants where you point, props the failing espalier with a length of withy, touches his hat, and offers no opinion on anything that is not a plant. He has worked for you 11 years and asked you precisely no personal questions. Whatever he sees on his rounds of the borders he files where he files the weather, as a fact of the place, not his business to remark upon. Love conducted under an open sky has a particular freedom, and you have come to prefer it to any drawing room. The birds carry on with their own loud business. Nobody can creep up unheard across gravel, and the watchers stay comfortably indoors, where secrets are kept behind locked doors, while you walk the gravel arm in arm and say the unsayable things to the roses, who keep them. You reach the moss-roofed hut as the light goes gold, and you sit, and you say the thing you came out to say, and the garden keeps it the way it keeps everything, openly, beautifully, and without a word to anyone. You have become, to your mild horror, a destination. Travellers detour from the main road specifically to see you, the famous devoted pair, and you must decide, visit by visit, how much of yourselves to actually show. You give them the library and the garden. You give them learned conversation and faultless manners. You give them the version of two devoted friends that they came so far to admire, and you quietly withhold all the rest. Managing the curious is its own daily craft, warm enough to stay respectable, controlled enough that nobody leaves your gate with a story you did not choose to give them. It crept up on you slowly, this fame, and you are still not entirely sure how you feel about it. You set out to live quietly and instead became a curiosity, the famous devoted pair, a fixed point on the mental map of every traveller passing between the great roads. They write ahead, or worse, they simply arrive, and you have had to develop, against your own inclination, the polished public manner of people who are looked at for a living. So you have built a tour, though you would never call it that, and you give the same one to nearly everyone. The library first, because the library impresses and reassures in equal measure, shelves of serious books in 4 languages making the silent argument that whatever else these women are, they are learned and harmless. Then the garden, your real pride, walked at a pace that allows admiration and discourages lingering. Conversation over tea, witty but careful, generous with opinions about poetry and stingy with anything about yourselves. It is hospitality as choreography. Each visit demands a strange double act. You must be warm, because coldness would be remarked on, and remarked on is dangerous. A pair of unfriendly recluses invites exactly the speculation you most want to avoid. But you must also keep complete control of what leaves with the guest, because every visitor is a potential storyteller, and the story they tell in the next drawing room is a story you will never get to correct. So you give them charm and learning and a beautiful afternoon, and you send them off with a head full of admiration and not one fact you did not choose to hand over. The greatest of your callers play their own part in the protection, without ever meaning to. A famous poet visits and goes home to write you into a sonnet. A duke takes tea on your terrace. The reasoning of the world is simple and useful. Surely two women, received by the great and good, praised in verse, sought out by the celebrated, cannot be anything other than the noble friends they appear. Respectability, you have found, compounds like money. The more eminent the visitor, the thicker the armour. One caller saw through all of it, and you knew the moment it happened. A sharp-eyed old woman named Mrs. Tilney, brought along by a mutual friend, watched the two of you across the tea things for an hour and understood. You are quite certain. Everything. She said nothing pointed. But as she left, she pressed your hand a beat longer than courtesy required and remarked, quietly, that it was a rare thing to see two people so entirely at home with one another. Mrs. Tilney knew. Mrs. Tilney also, being of a certain age and certain experience, plainly approved and carried your secret away with her as carefully as if it were her own. By evening the carriages have rolled away down the lane, the cups are cleared, and the house exhales and becomes private again. The performance is exhausting in a way ordinary social fatigue never is, because every gracious hour of it was also an hour of vigilance. You sit at last in the quiet you actually came to this country to find, and you let the public face fall away, and you are, once more and only here, not a curiosity or a legend, but simply two women alone in a room they built, with the door, for once, truly shut. You are, against all the odds, applying for the protection of the crown. Two women living together on too little money is a precarious thing, so you write the careful letters, you call in the well-placed friends, and you make the quiet case that your household deserves a small royal pension. The astonishing part is that it can actually work. Respectable patrons take up your cause, a queen lends her influence, and the same establishment that would never once name what you are agrees, in the end, to help pay for it. You are learning that respectability, performed well enough, becomes a kind of armour. The need is real and unglamorous. The allowance you fought for has thinned with the years, prices have risen, and two gentlewomen cannot keep even a modest establishment on good manners alone. So you do the thing that should be impossible and turns out merely to be difficult. You petition. You write the careful letters. You remind the well-placed friends of old kindnesses. You assemble, piece by piece, a case that your devoted and blameless household deserves the small mercy of a royal pension. The strategy rests entirely on the story the world already believes about you, and you lean on it without a shred of shame. You are not, in these letters, two women who defied their families and built a marriage no law allows. You are two ladies of refinement and learning, fallen on hard times through no fault of their own, an ornament to the nation that a generous crown might fittingly support. Every word of it is true. Every word of it also leaves out the one fact that matters, and the leaving out is the whole art of it. The irony is staggering, and you let yourself enjoy it, because you have certainly earned the enjoyment. The very establishment that would, if it understood you plainly, recoil in horror, is being asked to open its purse on your behalf, and may very well do it. A queen could put her name to your support. The crown itself might end up quietly underwriting a household it would never knowingly bless. You are turning the era's willful blindness into hard currency, and the coins, if they come, will spend exactly as well as any others. The friends who carry your cause are worth more than gold here. There is a duchess who admires your learning, a bishop who enjoyed his afternoon in your library rather more than he would admit, a member of parliament who owed your late father a favour. They speak for you in rooms you will never enter, and they speak the approved language fluently, the language of worthy gentlewomen and tender female friendship. Lady Bisham in particular takes up your case like a terrier with a rat, writing letter after letter in her slashing hand until the relevant official simply gives in to be rid of her. The whole exercise leaves you with a lesson you tuck away for later use. Respectability is not a feeling. It is a tool, a hard, practical instrument you can pick up and apply. Perform it well enough, long enough, in front of important enough people, and it becomes a kind of armor that turns aside not only suspicion but poverty itself. You did not invent the game. You have simply learned to play it rather better than the people who made the rules, because they have the luxury of believing the rules, and you have never once been able to afford that luxury. When the pension is finally granted, it is not a fortune, but it is security, and security is the thing your kind almost never gets to keep. You read the notice twice. Then you fold it away with your other important papers, beside the will and the small box of rings, and you allow yourself one dry smile at the thought of where the money comes from, and at the long blind chain of respectable hands that passed it, all unknowing, to two women in love. You live inside a gossip economy, and gossip is both the wolf at your door and the map in your pocket. The very same whispers that could ruin you are also how you learn which other women are like you, which households are safe, which famous lady was named a sapphist in someone's diary last spring. You listen very carefully at every table, you give away nothing, and you gather everything. The diarists and the talkers all think they are policing the boundary, but you have quietly turned their gossip into the only directory your kind will ever be handed. You have become, over the years, a remarkably attentive listener, and people mistake the attention for warmth. At every tea table, every card party, every long, dull morning call, you sit with your face arranged into pleasant interest while a second, cooler, and more calculating faculty quietly sorts everything you hear. Who is being talked about, and how? Which household is named with a knowing little pause? Which lady, lately, has been described as devoted to her companion? You are running an intelligent service of one, and your only equipment is a teacup and a still face. The danger of gossip you know intimately because you live one careless sentence away from becoming its subject. A whisper, once launched, cannot be recalled. It travels faster than any denial, mutates as it goes, and lands wherever it pleases. So you give the network nothing whatsoever to carry about you. You are discreet to the very point of dullness on your own account, the woman about whom there is simply never any news, and that engineered blankness is the best protection you own. But here is the part the gossips would hate to learn. The same machine that could destroy you is also the only map you will ever be handed. Nobody prints a directory of women like you. There is no register, no society, no notice in the paper. There is only the gossip, and buried inside its malice is real information, if you know how to pan for it. When Mrs. Selby says, with a sniff, that the two Miss Hartleys are awfully inseparable for grown women, she believes she is condemning them. You hear an address. So you mine the contempt for its accidental treasure. A sneering aside tells you which household might be a refuge. A scandalized murmur tells you which lady has already, perhaps, walked the road you walk. A name said, with a certain curl of the lip, is a name you file away as someone who might, one quiet day, become a friend who understands. The talkers think they are policing a border. They have no idea they are drawing you a chart of every safe harbour on the coast. Your great unwitting informant is Mrs. Selby herself, the most relentless gossip in the parish, who would be appalled to know she is your single best source. Mrs. Selby leans in over the seed cake, drops her voice to the register she saves for the truly delicious, and pours out the parish's secrets in exchange for nothing but your apparent fascination, which you supply in great abundance. She thinks she is scandalizing you. She is in fact briefing you, and she does it weekly, for free. You walk home from these afternoons with your harvest, sorting it as you go. This household, safe. That lady, possibly one of your own. This name, to be approached carefully some day. That one, to be avoided. Not one of the women who handed you all this over the seed cake ever knew they were doing it, and you thank them warmly and ask for more. The wolf is always at the door. You have simply learned to read its tracks and to follow them, now and then, all the way to a friend. You wake to discover that you are a joke in print. Someone has written a pamphlet, or a verse, or an anonymous mockery aimed squarely at women like you, and it is being passed hand to hand and laughed over in rooms you will never enter. Your task now is simple endurance. You cannot sue, you cannot explain, you cannot demand the thing be withdrawn. without admitting that you recognize yourself in it. So you hold your posture, you keep your manners, and you let the laughter spend itself, betting steadily that dignity outlasts a cheap rhyme. Usually, given enough time, it does. It arrives like weather, the bad news, carried in on a visitor's too bright face. Someone has put you in print. Not by name, perhaps, but plainly enough, a coarse verse or a sly pamphlet aimed at women of your sort, and it is being passed hand to hand and laughed over in rooms you will never enter. You feel the particular cold that comes when a private life is suddenly held up, distorted, for public sport, and you understand at once that there is almost nothing you can do about it. The helplessness is the worst part, and you face it squarely. You cannot sue, for to sue you would have to stand up in open court and explain precisely what slander you object to, which is to say you would have to confirm it. You cannot publish a rebuttal, for the same reason. A denial only spreads the charge and invites the question of why you protest so much. You cannot even permit yourself to look wounded, because a flinch is itself a kind of confession. The one move available to you is the hardest of all, which is to behave as though nothing whatever has happened. So you compose your face, and you go out into the world exactly as you always do. You pay your usual calls, you discuss the usual nothings. You are perhaps a shade more serene than usual, a touch more unbothered, because you have understood that your only weapon against mockery is to deny it the reaction it feeds on. A joke needs a wince to land. Give it nothing, and it begins, slowly, to wilt for want of air. The long game is the only game you can actually win. The pamphlet is loud now, but it is cheap, and cheap things are not built to last. The laughter that feels like a roar this week will be a chuckle next month and forgotten by spring, while you go on, steady, dignified, and unbothered, day after day, simply being the respectable woman you have always appeared to be. Scandal is a sprinter. You have trained your whole life as a long-distance walker, and the race, in the end, runs far longer than the scandalmonger has the wind for. Your friend, Mrs. Cleghorn, loyal and indignant, urges you to fury, arrives breathing fire, wants names, wants consequences, wants someone horsewhipped before nightfall. You calm her with a hand on her arm and a cup of strong tea, and you explain, gently, that the surest revenge is to be so visibly untroubled that the whole performance curdles into the embarrassment of the people who laughed. Mrs. Cleghorn does not fully believe you, but she watches you hold your line over the following weeks, watches the talk lose its heat against your serene indifference, and slowly comes round. And it does lose its heat, as you knew it would, because it always does. The pamphlet yellows in a drawer somewhere. The wits move on to a fresher target. The rooms that rang with it grow quiet again, and you are still there, unbroken, unhurried, exactly as respectable as the day before it ever appeared. You never read the thing yourself. You decided that early, and you have kept to it. Whatever it says, you will not grant it even the small victory of your eyes. You are a widow, and widowhood, grim as it sounds, has just handed you the one thing your whole life had denied you: control. Your husband is gone, the property is partly yours, and for the first time no man holds legal authority over your days. You can dress as you please, travel as you please, and share your house openly with the woman whose company you actually want. Society watches a widow far more loosely than it watches a wife or a daughter, and you intend to use every last inch of that slack. Grief, it turns out, arrived bundled with freedom. You did not love him, and you will not pretend, in the privacy of your own head, that you did. The marriage was arranged, endured, and survived, a transaction conducted in lace, and when he died you performed the grief the world required with a competence that surprised even you. But underneath the black crape and the lowered eyes, something quite different was happening, something you would never say aloud at the funeral. A door had opened. For the first time in your adult life, no man held the keys to your days. The transformation is legal before it is anything else, and you feel the law lift off you like a heavy wet coat. As a wife you were covered, your property his, your very self folded into his in the eyes of the courts. As a widow you spring back into existence as a person. You can hold money, make plans, refuse callers, go where you like, all without asking a single soul, and the strangeness of it is intoxicating after years of quiet erasure. So you do the things you were never permitted. You dress to please yourself in plainer, bolder, more comfortable clothes than any wife dared wear. Some whisper that you have grown mannish, and you find you do not much care. You travel, and you open your house, at last, to the woman whose company you have wanted for years, installing her not as a guest but as a fixture, a companion, a presence the world can name in the safe old way while you both know exactly what it is. Society grants a widow a remarkable amount of slack, and you mean to use every inch of it. A young, unmarried woman is watched like a hawk. Her every move is a move on the marriage board, but a widow of a certain age, past the obvious uses, slips into a wonderful blind spot. Nobody is guarding her virtue for a future husband. She is, in the eyes of the world, finished, and being finished turns out to be the freest thing a woman can be. Your companion, Miss Berry, moves through the house now as though she has always belonged in it, and in every way that counts she has. Miss Berry rearranges your books to her own liking, argues with you happily about sculpture and politics, and sits across the hearth each evening in the particular comfortable silence that only exists between two people who have long since stopped performing for each other. The neighbours call her your devoted friend and your great support in your bereavement. You let them. The phrase is a gift, and you have never been too proud to accept a useful gift. One particular guilt you examine and set aside, because honesty requires you to look at it first. A man died, and his death is the hinge on which your happiness swung open, and you would be a monster not to feel the weight of that. But you did not wish it, you did not hasten it, and you have decided you are allowed to mourn the man and welcome the freedom in the same breath, because the two things are simply true at once, and pretending otherwise would be its own small cowardice. So you wear the black, for now, as long as decency demands, and underneath it you are, quietly and for the first time, entirely your own, with the woman you want under your roof and no one left on earth with the standing to object. You have chosen the truly dangerous version, which is to live as a man entirely. The clothes, the new name, the work, the wage a woman could never earn, perhaps even a wife who may or may not know the truth. And here you walk a line the law actually cares about, because loving a woman breaks no statute at all, but marrying one under a false name is fraud, and fraud the courts will punish with a public whipping and worse. So you weigh it every single day. The protection the disguise buys you against the precise legal cliff waiting if anyone ever looks too closely. The disguise is total, and that is what makes it both safer and far more dangerous than anything the cottage women attempt. You do not pass as a devoted friend. You pass as a man. Full stop. You bind and pad and dress. You lower your voice. You take a man's name and a man's trade, and you walk through the world collecting the 1,000 small privileges that fall, unasked, on anyone the world reads as male. You can earn a real wage. You can drink in the inn. You can walk home alone at night without fear. You can, if you dare, take a wife. It begins, for many who try it, as pure practicality rather than romance. A woman alone is prey and a woman alone is poor. The same labour that earns a man a wage earns a woman a pittance. So some who walk this road are fleeing poverty more than pursuing love, and the disguise is a tool before it is ever a truth. For you it is both, tangled past separating, the freedom and the love arriving in the very same suit of clothes. Now here is where the law, which ignored you so completely as a woman loving a woman, suddenly snaps awake. 2 women in a cottage break no statute. There is nothing on the books to charge them with. But a woman who marries another woman while passing as a man has committed fraud, plain, prosecutable, and provable, and fraud the courts will pursue with real energy. The crime, in the end, is not the love. The crime is the lie told to obtain the marriage, the false name signed in the register, the deception practiced on church and bride and state alike. Consider the case of poor Mary Hamilton, whose story every woman on this road knows by heart, the way sailors know the rock that wrecked the last ship. She lived as a man, she married, and when she was discovered the court hardly knew what law she had broken, since loving a woman was no offence, so it convicted her of fraud and had her publicly whipped through 4 towns as a warning. Her real sin, the court decided, was the imposture, and the imposture is precisely the thing you must commit fresh every single morning. So you live on a knife's edge, the cottage women never feel. Every day the disguise holds is a day of liberty no woman in skirts can match. But discovery does not mean mere scandal for you. It means the magistrate, the dock, the lash, a doctor's examination, a suspicious official, a quarrel with the wrong neighbour, any of these could pull the whole life down in an afternoon and put a courtroom where your future used to be. You weigh that risk against the freedom each morning as you bind your chest, and each morning you decide, again, that the freedom is worth the cliff at your back. What you share with all of them, the cottage ladies and the passing men alike, is the same root refusal, to accept the small, watched, dependent life the world laid out, and to seize a larger one by whatever means the world happened to leave unguarded. You settle the hat, you square the shoulders, and you walk out as a man into a day that will pay you, protect you, and hang you if it ever learns the truth. You travel together, 2 women and a trunk, and the road is full of small problems and one enormous, useful blind spot. Inns simply assume you are companions and put you in a single room without a second thought. Coachmen, landlords, fellow passengers all see nothing whatsoever remarkable in 2 ladies keeping each other company on a long journey. The very thing that would instantly damn a mixed couple protects you completely. So you cross the whole country in plain sight, sharing rooms and sharing beds the entire way, chaperoned by nothing but the era's iron certainty that nothing could possibly be going on. The genius of travel for 2 women like you is that the entire apparatus of the road was built to police a danger you do not pose. Every inn, every coaching house, every nosy landlady is on guard against one specific scandal: an unmarried man and woman sharing a room. That is the thing the system was designed to catch. You and your companions sail straight through the net because the net has a hole in it precisely your shape, and nobody who built the net ever once imagined you. So the landlord at the King's Head shows you to a single room with a single wide bed and thinks nothing of it at all beyond the saving of a fire. 2 ladies travelling together share a room as a matter of course. It is cheaper, it is safer, it is what respectable women do on the road. He would be far more trouble to put a lone woman in a room near a male guest than to tuck the 2 of you cosily in together. The arrangement that would scandalise him in any other pairing is, in yours, simply good housekeeping. The road relaxes around you completely once you are clear of your own parish. At home there are eyes that have known you for years, neighbours keeping their long, slow accounts. On the road you are anonymous, 2 unremarkable gentlewomen among the endless traffic of coaches and carriers, and anonymity is its own kind of holiday. Nobody here is keeping a tally of how often you travel together or how devoted you seem. You are just 2 more passengers, and the freedom of being no one in particular goes to your head like wine. The coach itself throws you together in ways no drawing room would ever permit, and the world calls it nothing. Pressed knee to knee for hours over bad roads, sharing a blanket against the cold, dozing with her head on your shoulder while the lamps swing and the wheels grind on through the dark, you travel in a closeness that at home would set tongues wagging, and here sets no tongue wagging at all. The other passengers see 2 friends making the best of a long, cold and tedious journey. You see something else, and you keep it safe behind your eyes, and the miles roll by. At one inn, a sharp landlady named Mrs. Pocock looks at the 2 of you a moment too long over the register, and your heart performs its old familiar lurch. Then Mrs. Pocock decides, visibly, that there is nothing to see, just 2 tired ladies wanting their supper and a bed, and she shows you up herself with a candle and a complaint about the weather. Whatever flicker of suspicion crossed her face is gone before it can settle, smoothed away by the same comfortable certainty that smooths your whole path. That women simply do not, that women simply cannot. These journeys hold a sweetness you treasure precisely because it is stolen so openly. For the length of a trip you are, in effect, married in public, sharing rooms and meals and beds across the length of the country, and the country waves you cheerfully along, holding the door, carrying your trunk, wishing you a pleasant onward journey. You climb back into the coach in the grey morning, settle the blanket over both your laps, and roll on toward the next town, 2 women and a trunk, warm, unremarkable, and entirely unsuspected, with the whole road wishing you a pleasant journey. You are running an estate, and you are doing it as well as any man in the county, which is precisely the thing that unsettles people. You walk your own land, you argue with your tenants, you study the coal lying under your fields, and you open a pit to work it. You read the leases, you check the figures, you face down a rival over mineral rights without once blinking. The neighbours can almost forgive whom you love. What they truly cannot forgive is a woman this competent with money and property, answerable to no husband and apologising to no one alive. The land came to you the way it almost never comes to a woman, through a gap in the family tree where no suitable man happened to stand, and you took hold of it with both hands and have never once let go. Every morning you walk your acres in your stout boots and your dark coat, and you know every field, every wall, every tenant's arrears, the way a general knows his ground. The estate is not an ornament you inherited. It is a business you run, and you run it with an attention that quietly appalls the gentlemen of the neighbourhood. You sit across the table from your tenants on rent day, and you do not flinch, which they were not at all prepared for. You are fair, but you are not soft, and the distance between those two things is a lesson. Several of them learn the expensive way. Word gets round. The new tenants arrive already warned. Then there is the coal, and the coal is where you truly frighten them. Beneath your fields lies a fortune in seams, and you have no intention of leaving it for another man to dig. You study the workings, you talk to the colliers as an equal, you sink your own pit and set yourself squarely against a local rival who had assumed those seams were as good as his. He expected an easy victory. On learning a woman held the neighbouring land, and he is still recovering from how wrong he was. What genuinely scandalizes the county is not quite what you might expect. The whispers about your companion, about your friendships, about your unmarried state, those are old news, half spent. What truly affronts people, what they cannot quite forgive, is your competence. A woman who loves a woman they can file away as an eccentric. A woman who reads a mineral lease better than her own lawyer and beats a man at his own business is a far more disturbing creature, because she proves, in plain daylight, that the entire edifice of male necessity was always a little bit of a fiction. Your steward, a shrewd older man named Booth, came to you sceptical and stayed devoted, which tells its own story. Booth tips his hat lower to you now than he ever did to your uncle, walks the pit head at your side, and has been heard in the public house defending you with the flat finality of a man who has seen the ledgers himself. He does not call you remarkable for a woman. He has dropped the qualifier entirely, which is the highest compliment Booth knows how to pay, and you value it more than any drawing-room flattery. The work itself holds a freedom that has nothing whatever to do with whom you love. The land answers to effort and intelligence and nothing else. The coal does not care that you are a woman, and the leases do not soften for a husband you do not have. Out here, in the one arena where competence is the only currency, you are simply good at your work, and being good at your work is a pleasure no one can legislate or gossip away. So you walk back up from the pit at dusk, coal dust on your cuffs, the day's figures settled in your head, mistress of every acre in sight, and you understand that the life they once pitied you out of was never half so rich as the one you built instead. You are in love with a woman who has just married a man, and you are expected to be gracious about it. She did it for security, she tells you, for the income and the roof and the respectability that you simply cannot give her, and she means to go on loving you quietly on the side. So you become the secret behind a marriage, swallowing one particular bitter piece of knowledge, that the world offered her a safe and legal life with him, and only a precarious, unspeakable one with you. You manage the jealousy the way you manage everything else, privately and at real cost. She married him on a Tuesday, and you were there, in a good dress, smiling, because to be absent would have said far more than you could afford to say. You watched her take his name and his ring and his roof, and you applauded with everyone else, and you went home and did not sleep, and in the morning you got up and behaved as though your whole chest had not been quietly rearranged in the night. This is the part of loving a woman that no one ever warns you about. Sometimes the world simply outbids you, and you are expected to congratulate the winner. Her reasons were good ones, which is the real cruelty of it, because you cannot even hate her cleanly. She chose security, the one thing you could never offer her. The roof and the income and the place in the world that come only with a husband. She did not stop loving you. She told you so, and you believe her. She simply did the arithmetic every woman of your kind eventually faces, and the arithmetic came out in his favour, because his side of the ledger held the law and the money, and yours held only love. So you become the secret behind the marriage, the figure in the margins of her respectable life. You visit as her dear friend. You sit at his table and pass him the salt and admire his new horse, and afterward, in the snatched and guarded hours, you are something else to her entirely. It is a strange double existence, half tender and half humiliating, and you move through it carefully. This jealousy has a particular flavour, unlike any other, because it is jealousy of an institution rather than of a man. You do not, in truth, envy him her love. What you envy is what he was given for nothing and you could never earn at any price. The right to have her openly, to wake beside her without disguise, to be called her husband instead of her friend. He did nothing to deserve it but be born a man. You did everything, and were handed nothing at all. A woman named Mrs. Lawton in the next county lives this exact arrangement from the other side, and you have heard the talk, the careful sympathy, the way people call her companion such a devoted friend of the family. Mrs. Lawton smiles at her husband's dinners and writes letters at midnight to the woman she actually chose, and you recognize the machinery of it because you are caught inside the same machine. Half the devoted friendships in the county, you have come to suspect, are exactly this. You manage the cost of it the way you manage everything, privately, where it does not show. You do not make scenes. You do not punish her for choosing survival. You take the hours you are given, and you make them enough, or you make yourself believe they are enough, which on the good days amounts to very nearly the same thing. It is not the life you wanted. It is the life the arithmetic allowed, and you have learned to live in it with your grief tucked neatly out of sight. And when she catches your eye across her husband's crowded table and holds it, just for one breath, you remember that the law gave him the house and the name and the ring, but it never quite managed to give him this. You are ending it, and you discover that there is no machinery for this at all. There was never a contract, never a vow the law would recognize, and so there is nothing to dissolve, no settlement, no formal goodbye to perform. You simply stop. The letters slow, the visits end, and a relationship that was, in every way that genuinely mattered, a marriage evaporates, with no record that it ever existed. The same invisibility that protected you for years now quietly erases you, and you grieve a loss you cannot even name aloud to the people who watch you growing so still. It does not end in a single scene, which is part of what makes it so hard to grieve. There is no final quarrel, no slammed door, no decree handed down by anyone. Instead, it thins. The letters come a little slower. A visit is postponed and never quite rearranged. A coolness creeps in where warmth used to be automatic, and one day you realize, without being able to name the day, that the thing is over, and that it ended the way fog lifts, gradually and without announcement. Here you discover the cruel underside of the freedom you have enjoyed all these years. You were never married in the eyes of the law, which meant no one could forbid you, but it also means now that there is nothing to dissolve. A man and wife who part have machinery, however brutal, to part by settlements, separations, the grim public scaffolding of divorce. You have none of it. Other people's marriages end with lawyers, settlements, and a vicar shaking his head. Yours ends like a library book quietly never returned, with no record that it was ever borrowed. You cannot divide what was never legally joined. You simply stop, and the stopping leaves no mark anywhere but on the two of you. Consider the strangeness of grieving a loss that, officially, never existed. You cannot wear mourning. You cannot accept condolences, because no one knows there is anything to condole. To the world, a friendship has merely cooled, the way friendships sometimes do, and the world spares it not a second thought. The invisibility that protected you for so long now does its other work, the unkind one. The same blind spot that let your love live unexamined also lets it die unrecorded. There will be no trace of it in any register, no entry anywhere to say that for a span of years two women belonged to each other and then did not. When you are both gone, it will be as though it never happened at all, which is a particular kind of death, the death of the record laid on top of the death of the thing itself. The only soul who lets you grieve honestly is your old servant, who has watched the whole arc and needs nothing explained. She brings your tea a little stronger these days, sits with you by the fire a little longer in the evenings, and once, finding you staring at nothing, sets a second cup down beside your own and takes the chair across from you without a word. She says not one thing about it. She does not have to. She is the only witness your marriage ever had, and so she is the only mourner it will ever get. You go on, because going on is the only available verb. You return to your books and your garden and your careful rounds, and the days slowly stitch themselves back into something you can live inside. The grief does not vanish. It simply finds a smaller place to sit, somewhere below the surface where the world cannot see it and would not know what it was looking at if it could. And on certain evenings, when the light goes the particular colour it went when she was here, you let yourself remember, just for a moment, the whole unrecorded marriage, and then you fold it carefully away again, in the only place it was ever allowed to live, which is inside you. You and she are going to be married, and you are going to do it inside a church, in front of God, with absolutely no priest aware of what is happening. You have already exchanged your rings. Now, on Easter morning, you kneel together at the altar rail and take the sacrament side by side, treating that shared communion as the seal on a union the law will never grant you. To everyone else in the crowded pews, it is two friends taking the bread together. To the two of you, it is a wedding, a real one, and you both know exactly what you are doing. You chose Easter on purpose, because Easter is the one Sunday when the whole congregation comes forward to take communion, and a crowd is the best possible cover for a private rite. In the press of the faithful, two women kneeling together at the rail draw no eye at all. You have planned this the way you plan everything that matters, down to the pew you will sit in, and the planning is itself a kind of vow, a proof of how seriously you take a thing the world refuses to take seriously at all. The rings are already exchanged, weeks ago, in private. What you are doing this morning is different. You are bringing the marriage into the house of God and asking, silently, for the only blessing you will ever be able to claim. You will not ask the priest, who would refuse, who would be horrified, who has no category for what you are. You will go over his head entirely, straight to the authority he merely works for, and take your sacrament as your wedding feast without troubling the man at the altar with the truth of it. So you walk up the aisle together when the moment comes, and you kneel side by side at the rail, and the priest moves down the line, laying the bread on tongue after tongue, and when he reaches you, he sees only two devout ladies, friends, communicants, nothing more. He places the wafer, he says the words he says to everyone, and in the saying, all unknowing, he solemnizes the most irregular marriage in his entire parish, having no idea that the two women receiving the host from his hand have just, by their own private reckoning, become wife and wife. The sheer audacity of it warms you, and you let yourself feel the quiet triumph underneath your bowed head. The church would never marry you. The law would never recognize you. So you have simply taken what they would never give and made it yours inside their own walls, on their holiest morning, under their own roof, using their own right. It is not theft exactly. It is more like collecting a debt the institution does not know it owes, the blessing it withholds from your kind taken quietly, with both hands, while its back is turned. Your bride beside you is steady, her gloved hands folded, her eyes lowered, giving away absolutely nothing, and you love her in that moment with a fierceness that has no outward sign at all. Later she will tell you she could feel her own heart going like a hammer, and was certain the whole church must hear it. No one heard it. To the rows behind you, you were simply two friends at their devotions on a holy day. The most important wedding of your life had a congregation of hundreds and a guest list of two. You rise. You return to your pew. The service goes on around you exactly as before. Hymn and prayer and shuffle. And somewhere inside it, invisible, a marriage has just been made. You do not weep, though you could. You keep your face composed and your gloves smooth and your enormous private fact folded safely inside your respectable Sunday self. And when you step out afterward into the bright churchyard, married, blessed, and entirely unrecorded, you take her arm the way one friend takes another, and you walk home as wives, down a street that will never know it watched a wedding go by. You are writing your will, and you intend to leave her absolutely everything, which means you must commit one final, careful act of disguise. You cannot name her as your wife, because the law has no such category to offer you. So you reach once more for the word that has carried you both this far, and you leave your house, your land, and your name to my friend who lives with you at home. The word does its last and its largest job there on the page. It is, a thin and inadequate word for what she is. It is also the only one that will hold up in a court. The lawyer sits across from you with his pen poised, and you choose your words with more care than you have given to any sentence in your life, because this sentence must do in death what no priest or magistrate would let you do in life. You cannot write the true word. There is no legal form in which a woman leaves her estate to her wife, because in the eyes of the law you have no wife, you have only ever had, on paper, a friend. So you reach, one final time, for the word that has carried the two of you through 40 years, and you make it carry one last and heaviest load. My friend, you dictate, who is now living with me at my house, and the lawyer writes it down without a flicker, because to him it is an ordinary bequest, a spinster leaving her things to a companion. He does not hear what you hear in the phrase. He does not know that you are using the blandest, plainest, and most ordinary words in the language to do the most radical thing a woman of your kind can do, which is to make her love her legal heir, to bind your estates together past death itself through the one door the law happened to leave unlocked. That small grey word is bearing an enormous weight. Friend has been your shield your whole life, the polite container into which you poured everything that could not be said plainly. And now, at the very end, it does its largest job of all, transferring land and house and money to the woman you married in a church that did not know it married you. The word is thin. The word is inadequate. The word is also, it turns out, exactly strong enough. Your foresight carries a grim practicality that you are rather proud of. You know what happens to women like your beloved when their protector dies. You have seen the grasping relations descend, the wills contested, the surviving companion turned out of the home she helped build because she held no legal claim to a single chair in it. You will not let that happen to her. So you armour her future in the driest possible language, a will so correct and unremarkable that no greedy nephew will ever find a crack in it. Your love, in this one document, wears its most boring clothes precisely so that it cannot be challenged. The lawyer reads it back, and it sounds like nothing, like any other modest bequest in the county, and that nothingness is your quiet masterpiece. Mr. Sowerby blots the page, gathers his papers, and remarks only that it is a very sensible arrangement, a lady providing for her companion, very proper indeed. You agree that it is very proper. You sign your name. You have just done, in the flattest legal prose available, the boldest act of your entire life. You watch the wax seal go down on the folded document, and you feel a deep and particular peace, the peace of a soldier who has secured the one position that truly mattered. Whatever else the world denied you both, it cannot now turn her out into the cold. You have seen to that, in writing, in a hand that will outlast you. The word friend, which the world handed you as a cage, you have turned, on the very last page, into a key. There is one neighbour who actually sees it, and you have learned to feel her gaze land on you from across a crowded room. Everyone else takes the friendship entirely at face value. This one woman watches a beat too long, names you in her diary, says the word out loud to people who repeat it. You cannot confront her without confirming everything in a single breath. You cannot befriend her into silence either. So you do the only thing available, which is to give her absolutely nothing to work with. Perfect manners, perfect dullness, a household so respectable that her suspicions curdle into mere spite. Her name is Mrs. Thrale, and she is the one set of eyes in the county you cannot disarm. Everyone else looks at you and your companion and sees what they have been taught to see. Two devoted friends, a touching arrangement. Mrs. Thrale looks and sees the truth, plainly, the way you might spot a familiar face in a crowd, and worse, she enjoys seeing it. She collects suspected women the way other people collect china, and she keeps a diary in which, you are quite certain, your name appears beside a word you would never say in company. You have no defence against her sight, which is the maddening part. You cannot argue her out of something she has not said to your face. You cannot demand to know what she has written in a private book. You cannot even let her see that you know she knows, because the smallest flicker of recognition between you would be a confession, and she would pocket it with delight. So you must stand under her gaze across 100 drawing rooms and give absolutely nothing back, a performance of serene oblivion. Confrontation is impossible, and befriending her is worse. If you took her aside and asked her, plainly, to stop, you would be handing her the very admission she has been fishing for all along. And if you tried to charm her into silence, to flatter and cultivate her, you would only draw closer the one person most dangerous to draw close. She is a fire you can neither put out nor approach. The only thing to do is deny her fuel, and so you become, in her presence, the dullest and most correct woman in all of England. The contest between you is a strange one, conducted entirely without words. She watches for a slip. You decline to slip. She leans in at parties, steers the conversation toward marriage, toward scandal, toward other women of your sort, hoping to startle some telltale reaction out of you, and you meet every probe with the same mild, faintly bored composure, as though the subject could not possibly interest you less. It is a duel fought with raised eyebrows and unflinching smiles, and the only prize is whether or not she can ever prove what she already knows. Here is the quiet mercy in it. Suspicion is not proof, and a diary is not a court. Mrs. Thrale may be entirely certain. She may write your name in venom every single night, and it changes nothing about your daily life so long as she has no evidence and no law to carry it to. Her knowledge is real, but it is also, in the most practical sense, useless to her. She can be sure of you forever and never once be able to do you the slightest harm, and you take a cold satisfaction in the hard limits of her power. So you let her watch. You let her write. You go on being magnificently, impenetrably ordinary, and over the years her certainty, finding no purchase anywhere, curdles slowly into mere spite, the frustrated spite of a woman who knows a secret she can never spend. Spite fades. Spite is survivable. It was only ever proof you truly had to fear, and proof you have given her none. You nod to Mrs. Thrale across the room, perfectly pleasant, perfectly closed, and you watch her watch you, and the two of you understand the score exactly, and neither of you will ever say it aloud. You have grown old together, and somewhere along the way the village simply stopped wondering about you and absorbed you instead. You are the two old ladies in the cottage now, a landmark, a fixture, pointed out to passing visitors as a charming local feature. The scandal that once trailed you everywhere has worn smooth with the years, because nothing on earth disarms suspicion like decades of quiet, ordinary, unbroken devotion. You walk the same paths, you keep the same hours, you finish each other's sentences in front of the grocer. You have outlasted the gossip simply by refusing, for 50 straight years, to stop. Time, it turns out, was on your side all along, though it took 50 years to collect the debt. The young woman who arrived in this village trailing scandal is gone, replaced by a fixture so familiar that newcomers assume you have always been here, like the church or the old oak on the green. The very longevity that once seemed impossible has become your greatest disguise. Nobody suspects an institution. Nobody whispers about a landmark. The neighbours who once raised their eyebrows are mostly in the churchyard now, and their children grew up with the two of you simply present, a familiar, harmless, and unremarkable feature of the place. To them you were never a scandal to be solved. You were just the ladies at the cottage, there before memory, as fixed as the milestones on the road. Scandal needs novelty to feed on, and you have starved it of novelty for half a century, simply by failing to do anything except go on loving each other in plain, dull daily view. Endurance alone has accomplished all of this, with no help from anyone. You did not win acceptance by arguing for it. You won it by outlasting the objection. The suspicion that flared when you were young had nothing to burn once you refused, year after year, to provide a single dramatic chapter. No elopement to retell, no quarrel to enjoy, no downfall to predict. Just two women, reading and gardening and growing slowly grey together, until the watchers got bored, and then got old, and then got buried, and you were still there. The small intimacies of a long shared life are visible to the entire village now, and the village finds them touching rather than suspect. You finish each other's sentences at the grocer's. You bicker comfortably over the price of fish. One of you carries the other's shawl without being asked, knows which chair she prefers, orders her favourite cheese out of long habit. To a stranger it might look like exactly what it is. To the village it looks like devoted friendship grown beautiful with age, and the village is, in its way, not wrong, only incomplete. Even young Reverend Pike, freshly arrived and full of opinions, has been quietly absorbed into the consensus. Reverend Pike calls on you for tea, admires your famous garden, borrows books from your famous library, and refers to you from the pulpit, once, as an example of Christian constancy and friendship. You accept the compliment with grave faces and do not dare catch each other's eye until he is safely gone, at which point the laughter you have both been holding finally escapes. He meant every word of it. He simply did not know which constancy he was praising. A deep peace comes with being, at last, beyond question, and you savour it the way you savour the warmth of a fire you spent decades building. The performance is nearly effortless now. You have played respectable so long that it has stopped being a performance and become simply your life, indistinguishable from the truth it once concealed. The mask and the face have grown into each other. So you walk the lane together in the late sun, two old women the whole village would now defend, having won the longest and quietest victory there is, which was simply to grow old beside the person you chose, in plain sight, until the world forgot to mind. You are looking at a whole lifetime of evidence and deciding what on earth to do with it. The letters, the diaries, the coded volumes, the locks of hair, the entire tender record of a love the world agreed never to permit. Someone, after you are gone, is going to read all of these. They could be burned now, safely, tonight, and the secret kept forever. Or they could be hidden, kept, gambled on a future that might one day actually understand them. You sit with the choice every woman like you eventually faces. Protect yourself by erasing the proof, or trust the proof to outlive the silence. The papers are spread across the table in the lamplight, the whole archaeology of a hidden life. Decades of letters, tied in their faded ribbons, the journals, some plain, some in the cipher only you can read, a lock of hair under glass, an inscribed fly-leaf, a pressed flower gone to brown lace. Together, they are the only proof that any of it ever happened, that two women loved each other completely for a lifetime, and tonight you must decide whether that proof should survive you or die quietly with you. The case for the fire is strong. Burn it all, and the secret is safe forever. No greedy heir, no shocked descendant, no scandalized stranger can ever use these pages against your memory or against hers. Burn it, and you go into the ground as the world always saw you, a respectable spinster and her devoted friend, the truth tidied away into ash and never once spoken. But there is the other case, and it is quieter and stranger and harder to dismiss. Burn it, and you do not only destroy the danger, you destroy the only record that you were ever truly here. The marriage, the love, the whole stubborn triumph of your life would vanish as completely as if it had never been, leaving behind nothing but the polite lie. To protect yourself, you would have to erase yourself, and something in you balks hard at paying that particular price. Consider who might read these pages, in a world you cannot picture. Perhaps a future that has words for you, real ones, kind ones, words that are not hissed across card tables. Perhaps a young woman, a century from now, frightened and certain she is the only one of her kind, who needs more than anything to know that someone came before her, lived a whole life, loved and was loved and grew old unbroken. For her, these papers would not be evidence. They would be a hand reaching back through time to say, "You are not the first, and you are not alone." You think of John, the careful young relation who will one day inherit this house, and of the choice you are really leaving to him. You could lock the volumes away rather than burn them, hide them behind the panelling, trust them to the dark and to luck and to whoever finds them. It is a gamble with no way to know the outcome, a message sealed in a bottle and thrown into a sea you will never cross. But a hidden thing can be found, and a burned thing is gone forever, and between those two you discover, in the end, that you cannot quite bring yourself to choose the fire, so you do not burn them. You gather the letters and the coded journals and the lock of hair, and you wrap them carefully, and you hide them where they may sleep for a generation or a century, taking the enormous risk of being remembered exactly as you were. It is the bravest thing you have done since you were young, and it is the last great act of the same defiance that has run through your entire life, the flat refusal to let the silence have the final word. You blow out the lamp on a table swept clean, the evidence not destroyed but entrusted, and you go up to bed beside her, having gambled your secret on the kindness of a future you will never live to meet. You are old enough now to feel the climate quietly changing, and not in your favour. The doctors have started writing about women like you, giving the thing a clinical name, a diagnosis, a tidy place in their new textbooks. The effusive letters that your mother's generation read as perfectly innocent a beginning, suddenly, to be read as evidence. The very invisibility that sheltered your whole long life is lifting, and what is arriving to replace it is not acceptance but suspicion armed with a vocabulary. You watch the door that stood open for so many years begin, slowly and deliberately, to close. You have lived long enough to watch the weather of an entire age turn, and you do not like the look of the sky. For all your life the great protective fact was silence. Nobody named what you were, and what is not named cannot quite be hunted. Now, in your old age, the naming has begun. There are men, learned men, doctors and writers, who have started to study women like you, to catalogue you, to give the thing you are a clinical label and a tidy place in their thick new books. They have handed it a Latin name, a tidy diagram, and at least 3 grave footnotes, which is the surest sign in any century that the fun is officially over. The silence that sheltered you is being filled in, word by careful word, and not one of the words is kind. Consider the bitter irony. The very invisibility you spent decades cursing, the world's refusal to see you, was the thing that kept you safe. As long as you were unthinkable, you were unpunishable. Now that the doctors are making you thinkable, explaining you, diagnosing you, the safety is draining away, and what is rushing in to replace it is not the acceptance you might have hoped for, but something colder, a suspicion that finally has a vocabulary to hunt with. The effusive letters your generation wrote without a second thought, the "my beloveds" and the "I count the hours," are starting to be read differently by the young. Girls are watched now in ways you never were. All the innocent cover that hid your kind for a century is curling at the edges as the world learns to ask a question it never used to think to ask. So the door that stood open all your life is swinging slowly shut, and you happen to be standing where you can see it move. The women who come after you will not have the strange dark gift you had, the gift of a world too prudish to imagine them. They will be seen, named, studied, and judged, and they will have to find new ways to live that you never needed. Your young friend Miss Earnshaw, who reminds you painfully of yourself at 20, feels it coming too and asks you one evening, quietly, whether it will get better or worse. You take her hand and you tell her the truth, which is that you do not know. You tell her that you lived a whole free life in the shelter of being unseen, and that her generation may have to fight in the open for what you got by stealth, and that the fight may be harder, and may also, in the end, win something you never could, the right to be seen and to be unpunished at the very same time. There is grief in watching your own escape route close behind you, and you let yourself feel it. But there is something else too, something almost like hope, stubborn and contrary as everything else about you. The naming that endangers also, eventually, makes possible. You cannot fight for something the world refuses to admit exists. Only once it is named can it ever be claimed. So you watch the door close on the age that hid you, and you think of the women on the far side who will have to open a different one, and you find that you wish them, across all the years you will never see, the very same fierce luck that carried you. You spent the night dodging kind suitors with convenient headaches, smuggling love letters past a postal service far too polite to read them, kneeling for a wedding no priest knew he was performing, and leaving a whole estate to my friend in the dullest handwriting you could manage. You learned the rude words from gossips, the polite ones from poets, and the rest from a governess who tapped a book twice and said nothing at all. It is easy, from here, to laugh at how completely a whole society managed not to see what was sitting in its own drawing rooms. But spare a thought for the women who actually lived it, the Eleanors and the Sarahs and the Annes, who built entire marriages out of a word as thin as friend and made it hold for 50 years. They did not get to be loud. They got to be happy, mostly, and quietly, and on their own terms, which in their century was a small miracle performed daily. They hid their lives in plain sight, in shared beds called thrift and passionate letters called fondness and gardens walked arm in arm, and the very blindness that was meant to erase them turned out to be the thing that sheltered them. It is almost funny and almost kind, and you can hold both at once as the fire burns down. Thank you, truly, for spending this stretch of the night here with me. You have come a long way through bonnets and beaver hats and secret ciphers, and you have earned the soft part now, so let your shoulders drop. Let the candle gutter out. Let the long, careful day of being seen exactly as you choose finally set itself down. Breathe slow, and let the warm dark close over you like a drawn curtain. You did beautifully. Sleep well.